Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works in the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is David.
I am also known as the one and only Windrunner.
Only one.
Yep, only one.
The only one.
Yep.
Also joining us is Evgeni.
I am in. I have no idea where I was going to take that.
Yeah, me either.
There was a part of me that wanted to make a hey, you should rename yourself to Windrunner on the forums. That should be your nickname.
Okay, that would be pretty funny. That would actually be pretty funny.
And then another part of me was struggling that you said David instead of Ian because.
Yeah. No, I know. I had to do that same thing. Yes.
Yeah.
So who are you?
Who am I? I'm Batman. No, I am Argent on the places on the internet.
Cool. Also joining us is Alla.
Hey, I'm Rasarr, occasionally.
Occasionally. All right, nice.
Most of the time.
The Newt Watcher herself.
That's true, yes. Lastly, but not least, we have Veronica.
Hello, I am Cheyenne Sedai on Discord and the forums.
Awesome, and I am Chaos. And today, we're going to talk about Aethers. But before we do that, there is some relevant show and tell. Relevant.
Oh, show and tell is relevant. All right,
no, but this especially so.
In the spiritual realm, all show and tell is relevant.
We're gonna talk about the Hoid box that shipped in January for the years, only 1 year of Sanderson. So if you are still waiting for yours and trying to stay away from spoilers, I'm sure we're gonna have a timestamp in the description.
Yeah. I'll just put a timestamp where, if you want to skip past, sure.
If you are an audio only listener, I have no idea what.
Well, then you also will get the timestamps, and you can go to the next. Scoot forward a bit.
Okay. So let's try not to show where I live.
The danger of unboxings.
Right. So this is the box.
Nice.
I do like this like dragon scale thing texture that they added to it.
Sure.
And then it has a nice Hoid sticker in there. Inside the box, there are a couple of quotes from
awesome. I love that how pixely your camera is and internet is right now. That really enhances the experience.
It's like a slight spoiler tag.
This is much better than us doing a separate unboxing
mildly
video.
blurred.
Yeah.
And then in the box, and this is also not going to be like super well visible because t-shirts, right?
Which hopefully it's not green for the green screen.
Oh my god, it just blends right in.
Okay.
Hoid for president.
Okay.
Hoid for president.
That's a nice design.
Wouldn't be a good president.
There is something about the angle of his face that looks like Homelander to me.
So a lot of people have said that.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
There's something about it that makes me see that.
So we also have. Oh, these are going to be shiny. So we have a bunch of.
Wow, that's
very shiny.
That is crisp.
Okay, nice, good work. Good.
For you
people
to
have posted pictures on the Discord.
Vandalize
better quality.
Whatever you want. We have 2 packs of sticky notes.
Okay.
And these are going to be super hard to see.
Oh no, that works. There are still
better than almost anything so far.
And all of them are like that. And then this one says, "Dream big, you idiot."
Yeah, okay.
So both of them are. So I believe this illustration, this concept art, matches the mini for Wit for the Stormlight Minis Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This one, I believe, is brand new and unique.
Okay, neat. And then there's a pin, right?
There is a pin. There's a pin. It says 002 Hoid on the bottom. I know.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be the second box, but the Tress ones are delayed. Yeah.
Yep. It's a little chibi Hoid.
That's that's cute.
And we have a mouse pad.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. That art is nice. The art is nice.
I actually changed like my background to that art because it came with the Tress art pack.
Yep.
And I was kind of in desperate need to change my computer background, and so that's what it is now.
You see,
It's a good piece of
background. What if you just have 1,000 tabs and you never see the desktop?
Oh. And by the way, so when you get your thing, there will come a thing that lists all of the items. So
cool.
If you didn't want to get spoiled, one, you're too late. But two, you could refer to that.
Cool.
So the mousepad art is Howard Lyon. Do you know who drew the other piece of work?
I do not, but it looks very Ben McSweeney.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, I don't know if that's worth $60. I mean, the Dragonsteel shirts are extremely nice. You generally can't tell as I'm on the show, but I do always wear like a Dragonsteel shirt when I'm doing the show because you only see like up here. But they're very comfy. They're absurdly comfy. Yeah, for a swag of Post-it notes, I'm like, yeah, cool.
And I can confirm that this one is made of the same material when it has this. Like, I haven't put it on, but the feel of the material is the same as all of the other good ones.
Awesome. So they are selling the boxes separately, which I don't know. I guess I should have like lowered my expectations. I don't know. Maybe that's harsh. But
I do think that there was like maybe a hint of them wondering when they decided to push off the Words of Radiance Kickstarter, and they were like, let's see how people react to the swag boxes before we. And I think the reaction's been like mixed to good generally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't looked extensively around, just the things that I've been reading.
Yeah.
On the Discord primarily.
Yeah. I mean, not that differently priced from the Wax and Wane release swag pack and stuff. Realistically. And so you do get more there. I don't really care about fancy Post-it notes though, or stickers. So
I would struggle to use like a dream big you idiot sticky note somewhere that anybody else could see it, but that's probably just me.
Oh yeah, no. That's just me. But I don't know. I don't think we're gonna do unboxing videos on channel. Maybe we are. I don't know. I think the plan originally was, but I don't know. Maybe for the books.
Let's see if we survive the year.
Honestly, guys, my goal is to survive the year with just like regular content plans. Because we did like over 130 hours of content last year. So like that might be too much. I think it might. But you'll have regular stuff. Shardcast will be bi-weekly. So, don't you worry your butts. But
you can put a sticky note on your monitor that says survive the year, dream big, you idiot.
Cool.
Yeah, I was talking to my mom this morning. She's like, "You're already recording?" And I'm like, "It's not my fault that Brandon decided to release 5 books in a year."
True. Yep. Yeah. So we're just gonna be surviving, and I don't think there's gonna be a Dark One Forgotten podcast. Is all I'm saying.
Expect extensive Secret Project 2 coverage. Just podcast under podcast.
No. Look. There will be a Secret Project 2 podcast. That's the non-Cosmere one.
We can't confirm.
Yeah. What are we going to be talking about today, though?
What are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about Aethers. And to do that, we need spoiler warnings for everything that has come out, basically. Especially Lost Metal and Tress, which just came out, both of them. So...
And also some unpublished things because
we will be talking a little bit. I wouldn't say plot spoilers, just some lore stuff from the unpublished Aether of Night, which you can get on the forums. I'll put the link in the description.
And enjoy it. There also will be Stormlight spoilers specifically. So
not too much, but
major,
there's definitely some. Yeah,
there's a direct connection.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. Yeah. Okay, so everything. There you go. Let's
just not Stormlight 5 prologue and not
Stormlight
another
5
secret
prologue.
project.
Yeah, we're not doing those. Okay.
Damn. I can't bring up my Stormlight 5 prologue theory again. Okay.
Okay. So let's just get right into it. What is an Aether?
Good question. Yeah,
It's the thing the elves wanted in Dark World, right?
It's true. That is true.
It's the reality stone.
It's
Indeed.
the reality show. We're an MCU podcast, actually. We're doing a hard pivot, actually. To talk about Thor: The Dark World. That's what you want.
That's where you jump in if you're starting your MCU.
The best Marvel movie.
The best.
I would say that an Aether, pronounced Aether by Brandon, so
True.
we're sticking with it.
True.
Is both a substance that has oftentimes an intelligence associated with it.
Yeah.
And
Let's use an example, David.
Let's use an example.
Would be great.
Yeah.
There's a good
I
line
think
in
that's
Tress
the best
about
I
that.
can
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, let's take Twin Soul, but if you have a good line in Tress, you can use that as well.
Why don't you do both?
Yeah, we definitely can. Here, let me pull the Tress line up.
And I don't want us to like dig into that, but I think
It's good background.
providing context.
Absolutely.
No, I think so. Because it's hard.
Aethers are hard to define.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's hard to say substance just like in isolation. Essentially, Aethers are these materials. And as Ulam says in Tress, each of the Aethers up above is connected to a primal element: vegetation, atmosphere, silicate. And we see that in examples like Twin Soul, where we can, with a little bit of an assumption, say, okay, his rosite, it is rosite, is probably an Aether that is connected to the essence of silicate, at least within their lore about the Aethers.
Sure.
And so we can kind of think about it at least with that framework.
and with Twin Soul, there's also like this primal Aether that is like an actual conscious thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
intelligence.
So think of this less like how you have a bunch of different windspren and more like you have a single wind entity that you can contact in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I think there was, for a long time before we understood bondsmiths, the idea that the Stormfather might bond multiple people. And that didn't prove to be true, at least so far as we've seen. But that is kind of a good way to think about it, at least with the Aether bound that we see. That it is one invested entity that can bond with a bunch of different people simultaneously.
Yeah. And that invested entity is associated with some element. So like the Stormfather would be, and this is their example, but like the Stormfather would be the prime Aether of the essence of Storm or something like that.
Sure.
And it's a little more physical than Spren, at least from what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Like the Aethers are like actual things that you can touch and toss and die to.
Yeah. And we will talk about all the weirdness on Tress with that. So there's a lot of details. This is the overview section.
But you could even look at it as being analogous to a Spren too, because when a Spren come into the physical realm, they come in as a material, they come in as a metal. Sure. And you can imagine a metallic Aether, and those two concepts aren't so different.
Sure. Cool. Let's maybe quickly go through some meta history of the Aethers, because Brandon has wanted to get the Aethers in for a very long time. He said that this is kind of the last big magic system for the Cosmere. And so he wrote a book called Aether of Night. It was not published. So there is some interesting lore here. Brandon sort of rejiggered a lot of this stuff. So if you happen to read Aether of Night, I think things are very different now. But we can. But let's still look through what the Aethers were in Aether of Night, and quickly just go through those.
So first of all, we had Amberite, which was red or pink, not amber, like the name says.
Not amber.
And this is proto shard plates and shard blades.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Because it's like we saw, like with Twin Soul and the Lost Metals, basically, like it can grow around the user, and they can use it as plate or as blades, depending on the strength of the user. And so, key plot point was that the main character didn't have a very strong Aether, and so could only go to the blade part and could never like get to plate, like for example his older brothers, his younger brother, sorry.
Yeah, kind of a Kenton type guy. You know, I only got the one ribbon of sand.
Yeah. And this is obviously Rosite now.
Yes,
because it was weird that it was called Amberite, which is a better name.
It's a better name.
But I like pink crystals better. I think it's more fun.
Brandon should have leaned into the inconsistency and renamed it to Rosite, but also made it amber colored.
I like that. That's good. I like that.
That feels like it could happen.
I like it.
Yeah. Next is Verdant, which we've also seen in Tress.
Still canonical.
Basically, yeah, like Spider-Man, but vines. And so like Verdant users could like swing around and use the vines like to extend like parts of their body. And so
nice. And
if they were strong enough, they could also kind of have like protective, like use them to protect themselves, but it's not plate in the way Amberite is. And these two were opposites.
Right, because there was some whole big opposite thing.
There's like a polarization to the whole thing. With like a proto, it's like a. I'm not going to go into the
proto ruin preservation.
Oh yeah. Like, I've read some of this. Yeah. It's crazy. It's bonkers.
It's confusing.
Yeah.
Then we have Vistarin, which does not exist in canon as far as we know, and this would let users like graft animal parts onto injuries, and so they were like pretty resilient soldiers because you just graft an animal skin into the injury and they're fine.
But before we started, you said there were cat ears. That's Vistarin.
That has become a meme with the community that you would theoretically be able. Yeah.
Oh, so that's not in
Aether of Cat Girls.
I don't believe anybody ever has cat ears, but that's possible that it's in there.
I read Aether of Night recently, and we have someone with an eagle like claw as an arm.
Yeah, which I think
and like different
great.
things. But
sorry, did I just hear eagle as an arm, as in the whole bird eagle?
No, just the claw.
No, and the claw as an arm.
Oh, okay.
The
eagle claw.
Okay.
Yeah, I think another one had like a Hawkeye, which I imagine. I don't know how that fits the same socket, but I'm excited.
Hawkeye. We're talking about MCU.
It's the secret MCU episode.
Yeah.
Excellent. This is going great.
Yeah. Not so much material associated with that. It was a little odd.
It was weird.
I feel like whatever this has turned into is definitely going to be more in the vibe of we see the canonical Aethers and not like, whatever this is supposed to be.
Yeah. Then we have
no cat girls.
No cat girls.
Which is funny because everybody was theorizing that the sorceress was going to be a cat girl and all these things.
That's where that came from. That's right.
I think
that's
theorizing is very loosely.
That's a strong word.
It was a strong theory, Argent. Do not disparage the
you can't deny Aondor could give you cat ears. It's true. That's fact.
I cannot deny that.
It's a fact. Yeah, absolutely. It can do anything. Anyway, what's the next one?
So the next one is Ferrous, which is a bit confusing. So Ferrous users have two options. Either you become a corpate, and so you either become like one of these like metal pillars that are used to support the architecture, which is pretty extravagant, and also give warmth, which is, or you become a walker, which those are the two examples we saw. There might be more. But walkers are used like for transportation, and I always imagine it like,
just like going.
But like these like giant like cockroaches, I guess, because of the like plate that they have, and they took people around. It's confusing. And then the other Pharaoh users who didn't want to become corpates, which why would you want to become a corpate? Were like they're like caregivers, and so there would always be one with each corpate and like keep them company. And Ferrous users were known for being very reserved and cold towards everyone else.
This book sounds insane.
Just to clarify, so Ferrous Aether lets you turn into either architecture or machinery.
Yes.
Or it lets you interact with the sapient human architecture and machinery.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Do they remain sapient after they become columns?
Yes.
I think so,
That's why they need a friend. Like that is like the whole purpose of the other person is to have somebody to talk to. It's pretty dark, honestly, and it's not touched on much.
Point, one of the characters threatens to become a corpate if the main character doesn't choose her as his wife.
That's emotional abuse.
Kind of, yeah.
Corpates live a happy life, Argent, and allow the society to flourish. Don't question it.
We're going through this quickly. We're going through these quickly.
Motion to move on to the next.
Every time I hear something about Aether of Night, it's new and terrifying in a new way.
Yeah, and so Ferris and Besterin are similarly polarized, just like Verdant and Amber.
Animals, machines, sure, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Also, like Besterin and Amberite were grouped together. So Besterin, Amberite, and the Knight, which we'll get to, were grouped together.
Yeah.
It's like the whole like proto-ruin preservation thing. And they were like each related to like different shards, but it's confusing and I'm not going to get into that.
Very
so those are grouped together.
Nice.
And then Verdant, Ferris, and Illuminus were also grouped together.
Okay, let's get these last two Aethers here.
Yeah, one of them's important. The other one, not so much.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are the weird ones. So we have Illuminus that like the religious order, like the highest people in the religious order have. And it's used to teleport other people. Also, at the beginning of the book, nobody knows it's actually an Aether. They just think these powers are given to them by God or whatever, but it's an Aether.
I mean, it does
a big
seem...
reveal. Huge Aether of Night spoiler right there.
Yeah, but... and... Yeah, so that's Illuminus. And then we have Night, that's the opposite of Illuminus. And this is the one that's like the catalyst for the whole plot and why it's called Aether of Night.
Sure.
You can teleport yourself and whatever you're holding. So technically you can teleport other people if you're holding them.
Okay.
It happens.
Yep.
Does
exploit
it follow,
they use. Yeah.
Does it follow D&D rules where you have to like meet the carrying capacity? Otherwise you can't?
No idea. And this also makes like the midnight essence like things that like are attacking.
Were they called that in Aether of Night?
They're called the Forgotten.
Yes, they are.
Great.
They believe they're the spirits of their ancestors come again.
Great. The Forgotten.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Aether of Night is it does some of it gets on the protagonist, and it kind of serves to strengthen his normally weak Amberite to be much more powerful, and kind of gives it like a cool badass tint. You know,
of course.
just because that's how that sort of thing works.
Yeah. Like Venom from Spider-Man 3.
Powers.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and the implication was that Night and Illuminus were sort of like moving towards God Aether type things. Like they were moving. Chaos and order were how these things were polarized, and every generation of Aether was kind of moving closer to this more pure opposition, essentially. And the only other,
why these are the weird ones.
Yeah, the only other relevant thing I would throw out there was the characters do have buds in their hands that kind of show that they are whatever sort of Aether they are. It's an embedded gemstone in the palm for
Amberite, yeah,
Amberite.
Or the like bracelet of like a vine,
like a vine,
Verdant.
Yeah. And
no idea about Besterin and Ferris.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty easy to tell if you've got an eagle eye. They're like, I know. That guy stands.
You're a pillar. I figured it out.
the person with claws for
here.
Hands.
Yeah. But there are kind of what I would call core Aethers. Like they go at one point to the source of Verdant.
The Verdant Aether.
And can speak with proto-preservation / Aedenalcium in there.
Great.
It's confusing. The end of that book is very strange.
Old-timey Cosmere is just the most bonkers cosmologically from like what we have later.
He's trying it out.
He's trying it out. Yeah.
There is something interesting here, though, and it's the idea that what we now know to be the prime. Is it prime or primal? I keep forgetting.
Primal. Okay. Primal is what
Primal
Aethers
has. Okay. The Primal Aethers now are a callback to like a shard-like being from early Cosmere drafts, and that plays nicely with the idea that Brandon is been telling us in WoBs, where the Aethers consider themselves separate from the shards and predate the shattering and
and well,
maybe
they
make that argument.
They believe that.
Yeah.
But certainly the shattering, right? And so the primal Aethers probably consider themselves to be on the same tier as shards.
I don't necessarily know if they're quite that strong, but they're I would at least put them
themselves.
Yeah, sure. But hard to say. We don't really know, right?
Okay,
no.
That's fair. Okay, yeah, that's fair. But they are up there, right?
They're
and
up
so
there.
that calls back to originally the primal Aethers were, shards essentially, right? When shards didn't exist. And so this kind of power dynamic, where the primal Aethers are some of the most powerful beings in the Cosmere or entities in the Cosmere, goes all the way back like 20 years ago.
Sure. Cool. And we will talk about the canon Aethers because now there's 12, not 6. So we'll get into all that.
Yeah, twice as much fun.
Twice as many more red spikes. The primal element of red spikes.
The good old essence of red spikes.
And honestly, I don't know if it's more confusing or less confusing than the uncanonical version.
I mean, I'm sure red spikes has some essence that Brandon has in mind.
Oh, we'll get into it.
Oh yeah, we absolutely will. So there's some other meta history of Aethers, and they've popped up. They popped up in Lyre of Partinel. Honestly, I did not know this. I kind of forgot.
There is a character who is rides up at the end of one of the sample chapters, and she's got kind of a Shalon energy. I always felt like, but anyway, she gets there, and she has got an Aether on her palm that is speaking and interacting with her.
Okay. In
some way, I think it's in her, maybe in her forearm, but it is some sort of substance embedded in her. And similarly, the guy who is kind of the brutal leader of the Shrune Ring and the other kind of longer, harder to find Aether of Night sample chapter is himself has a sliver of an Aether, and it's kind of dead. He's it doesn't do much. He occasionally gets a little impression from it, but it's not. They fade with time is kind of the main thing we learn about them. And you can steal them. You kill somebody and you can take their Aether.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of stealing things, one of the things in Aether of Night is that one of the other protagonists, her people are being attacked and the government doesn't care about them. And so her mission is to go and get a bud of the most powerful Aether that, was the one the prince had. The air. And so she had to find a way to restrain him, cut off a piece of the Aether in his hand and bring it back to her people.
Yeah.
So they can have Amberite.
Chisel it off of him.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Sure.
And it would be fine later, but for a couple of weeks or days, it would be a bit weaker.
Cool. Then I kind of forgot this, but Brandon also tried to. This is a Time Waster's Guide post from 2004 here, where Brandon's talking about some ideas for series names, where he has the Aethers of Lore, and he wanted a sub-series name, something like Climb the Sky, the Aethers of Lore, Aether of Wind Trilogy, Book 1.
Even more complicated than the trilogy of trilogies with this word.
I love it.
Context, by the way, this is before Brandon was published. This is Brandon on his forum with his writer friends just shooting the breeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's deep cuts here, okay?
Titles have never been his strong suit.
Let's talk about Oath Shards. Remember that?
There is another. That's a good name. Shut up. But there is another post where he explores idea names for the metallic arts, and one of his original ideas for hemalurgy was going to be sanguimancy.
Well, because he called ferrochemy hemalurgy.
Yeah. I'm glad he moved away from sanguimancy. A little on the nose.
It's a cool name, though.
It's pretty cool. Cool. So let's move into actual canonical stuff. We're doing great on time. Half hour in.
But that was quick. Compared to how confusing it
for
is.
For our show.
And show and tell of the Hoid box.
Yeah. All right. So what did we get in Stormlight, David?
Oh, in Stormlight. Well, okay. Well, there's a couple things we got in Stormlight. One thing we knew we had, or a couple things we knew we had, and then something we did not know we had until later.
True. That's true.
So the Aether is mentioned a couple times in the context of the Ghostbloods, because they are our off-worlders that we see a lot of. One time by name, and that Mraize somehow gets Aether on his pants.
Let's talk about that.
I don't understand how that's supposed to work, but sure, Brandon.
I want to talk about that, because none of the Aethers that we have seen would stain pants.
Well, it's an interesting question, because we don't get, because the way things work, we don't get like a water Aether. Brandon doesn't seem to do water as an element very often. And it'd be cool if there was an Aether that was liquid.
The issue with the water ether is that it's the same problem that if you remember in White Sand, where they fuel their sand magic with water, and they also originally had a power that let them produce water from sand.
Yeah, it's vacation.
Right.
It's a similar sort of issue that I presume Brandon doesn't want to create a perpetual Aether machine where you no, you pour some ether on water, which turns into water, which turns ether into water, which turns ether into water.
Yeah. There's one sea that's just a water sea on Tress's planet, and they're like, "What are you guys talking about?"
Right. But I can see like
that sea would just.
What the hell, Sapphire?
Sea would kill this entire planet by just spreading the water around.
Atmosphere.
Oh, so that's Zephyr. Okay.
Zephyr.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can see like an Aether whose primal essence is, oil or something. Or,
oil. Yeah.
Was it? I think it was a red stain, but I don't remember. And I feel like.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish.
I would not be surprised if in the 10th anniversary edition of Oathbringer, you were to look at that thing and there's some other minor twist to it that makes it make a little more sense.
Because this was before Brandon had his revelation about changing up the Aethers, and so he's probably just like, look, these will be important. I'm just gonna name drop them, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and the other major obvious example was Mraize on his shelf of trophies, several of which we still don't understand at all, has a piece of pink crystal that looks very fragile. It is rosite, we now know, and I assume they're maintaining it in some way so it doesn't crumble away.
It must be,
and some other. I mean, it is fragile, apparently. So those are the two we know about, and we also are introduced to creatures known as the Midnight Essence.
That was the craziest thing about Tress, I gotta be honest. I mean, there was a lot of crazy things about Tress.
But just before we do move on to the Midnight Essence conversation, because that's going to be long.
Yes.
I always got the impression when, the whole, Aether stain conversation that maybe somehow it was related to rosite. But I was like, how could a crystal make a stain? And that always confused me, but it's a red stain and the rosite is pink. So it's well, I guess maybe, but I have no idea how that works.
Maybe there is a world out there where ether comes in form of paste.
I mean,
it might.
Yeah. So we will go through all the Aethers we have.
In the interest of always providing you all with accurate information, I did look up the Aether quote so to make sure we can say the correct thing here.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And let's see. Where is she? Oh, I found it and then I totally lost it. Okay. So she is, oil stains were challenging enough, but this man had gotten blood on the same spot, is how she describes the stain. So oil and blood.
Red spikes.
The firm red spikes and make a clacking sound he stained his pants with.
Bet that red spike in your palm. Easy.
Maybe they're slightly oily and then it poked him and he bled a little bit, and that's the stain.
Easy. So let's talk about the two strains. These, we see two different manifestations of the Aethers. How about that? Where
Brandon has used the word strain
Yeah.
to describe what's happening. In fact, in text, in Tress,
Yep.
I believe it is used. And my read on this, just so we are on the same page, is that the primal elements, the primal essences, are still the same. It's still silicates, vegetation, whatever.
Yep.
And then you have potentially, well, you do have multiple beings, multiple Aethers that are associated with each one of those. So there are multiple Aethers, maybe one primal Aether and more non-primal, that are all linked to vegetation in some way. And then multiple individuals can connect with each one of those. And that's how you get kind of the chain propagating, right? And so when we talk about different strains of Aether, we are talking about different groupings of, so all of the Aethers on Lumar or the moons of Lumar are one strain, right? And then all of the primal Aethers are, maybe you can think of them as another strain, or maybe all of the strains come off of the primals.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
But you can imagine a different world, not the Aether homeworld, not Lumar, but a third world where there is another set of 12 that behave differently from the other two, and those would be another strain.
Strain is such an interesting word because that just reminds me of like viruses and like reproduction like that. So it's like there's almost like there's some Aether reproduction. Like I don't think there were necessarily like however many sets of verdant, and maybe the primal one is like one of them. I more think it's likely that somehow some verdant got split off from the primal one, and it sort of maybe grew its own intelligence, kind of, and it sort of went down this way, maybe.
Sort of wondering if, like, the way the different strains form is that if you bring an Aether to some other world and somehow connected to, like, connection, capital C connection, like if you could cut up the connection to the primal Aethers and then create a connection with the world you took it to, that would create a new strain, because that's kind of how some plants are propagated by farmers, not naturally, that you cut off a branch and plant it elsewhere.
Yeah, okay.
I'm reminded of the thing that the two of you who've read Aether of Night were talking about, where a character took part of someone else's Aether bud and then like transplanted it, essentially.
And the thing that occurs to me is Aethers aren't shards, right? But there's this idea, ruin and preservation and their interaction with Scadrial like made the magics look a certain way. And so you could have something where take some of the Aether, move it elsewhere, and maybe there's some interaction with the planet that leads to like some different representation. And maybe like with Lumar, it's interacting, all 12 of the Aethers are still interacting with Lumar in that same way. So it's not like you get 12 totally different things. Like it's still themed in the same way, right?
Yep.
And another thing that I was thinking too is that a motivation to do this straining thing is, it kind of reminds me of Autonomy and their avatars, and that it's a way to propagate your power, is to create more strong Aethers on other worlds, and sort of in your totality, if you are looking to kind of remain significant, it's a way to expand your influence.
Sure.
And it's also about adaptation, right? The more like different expressions of your power you have, the more likely you are to be able to adapt your power to new environments, right?
Sure. Still bonkers that we got from taking some of this to moons, but you know, there's some holes here, is what I'm saying.
Unclear how Lumar came to be. That to me is a fascinating idea.
extremely unnatural.
And we can't even necessarily say Ada Nalcium made it that way because the Aethers disagree.
The
So-
Primal Aethers made it that way.
Sure. This is the Primal Aethers playground. Maybe. I mean, honestly,
I
that actually is
guess.
possible, to be honest.
Yeah. We don't even have a
There's
spoiler
like-
stream to ask Brandon about this.
I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's a spoiler
Mythical.
stream, well, I'm sure we'll do an episode sometime, but who knows? And when I can't plan on it, you don't get it as fast. So,
But let's circle back to now that we've established what we mean by strain,
Yep.
and we've talked about strains a little bit.
let's talk about
Eric,
these.
you wanted to talk about the two strains that we know about.
Yeah,
or
and
maybe
I mean, yeah, we've kind of referred to it before in our introduction, but like the Aetherbound, this definitely seems like the sort of traditional, like this is what's happening on the Aether homeworld, which we don't have a name for. The thing we see with Twin Soul, there's many people bonded with a central entity, that primal Aether, and that is what's granting Twin Soul the ability to manipulate that Aether, assuming you have, water and stuff, right? And that seems really sensible to me, and I do like that it's different from the Spren bond type thing. You have lots of people bonded with a single thing.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see a bunch of lower, kind of like, I don't want to say lower power deities because I'm sure they would take offense to that.
I'm sure they would. They were real.
But like, you know what I mean? Like with the way shards are structured on a planet, we have at most 3 kind of directly interacting. And so it's cool to think about a system that has like 12 lower level deities.
Sure. And just the interactions, like there's a lot of fun interactions and stuff there. Yeah.
And I've always wanted Brandon to, because Brandon is known for like wacky magic systems that are very unique, right?
Yeah.
I've always wanted him to do, like, to see his take on an elemental magic system.
Yeah.
Like a traditional fire, water, earth, air type of thing. And Aethers are essentially that, right? They're not the traditional elements that we read about in a lot of fantasy and a lot of history, but they are elements.
You got like
and this
plants,
is
you got
elemental magic.
air, you don't, no water.
Yes, so some of them are the traditional. Like we do have, like Eric just said, we do have fire, we do have air, we do have life. We do,
And earth bending.
And everything changed when the red spikes attacked.
or that.
That's the dark Aether that has taken over Twin Soul's homeworld.
Then Lumar is very different, which admittedly was very funny last year, like when we had the sample chapters for Tress, and Brandon's like, yeah, so I'm going on and talking about like, oh yeah, this is a totally different strain actually. There's a whole other thing of Aethers, and meanwhile Brandon's written Lost Metal, and like, oh, okay, I get it. I see why you're talking about that. And so on Lumar, you have giant moons that are just constantly making spores, and it's dumping onto the planet. And that is creating the seas. The moons are very close to the planet, and they're dumping the spores there. There's these spore eaters, which is interesting because that's what Crow is, right?
Yeah, that's the offensive term, Eric. They're gestators for the verdant Aether.
Oh, sorry. I don't have my terminology down, which is fair. It's unclear to me, like, how much, like, Silajana is clearly like sapient, right?
Yeah.
How much the verdant Lunagree on Lumar? Open question. How conscious it is?
Sorry, isn't the Lunagree is just the point where the spores fall down?
Oh yeah, okay. And the moon.
Actual, like,
yes, the moon.
The moon is the actual.
Sure.
Something on the moon is the actual, like.
Yeah. Or like in the center of the moon or something. Yeah.
They are sentient, but not necessarily sapient.
Okay, yeah.
That's kind of where I am. Yeah. They're much closer to beasts than they are to people.
That definitely gives me the impression that these happened much later than the primal Aethers, and like maybe they have not had enough time to come into sapience, perhaps something like that. Like it just take more iterations for however, like because investiture takes a while to become sapient, right?
Or maybe just like any bacterial strain, these are more specialized into one thing, which is like this aggressive, constant reproduction than they are at higher thought.
Sure.
I should point out, like, when Ulam is explaining like spore eaters to gestators to Tress, he says that the Aethers on Lumar's moons have become insatiable, aggressive, and fecund.
Okay.
So it might not be the case where they are still becoming more more like self-aware and such, but that they have somehow like devolved into this more hostile form that we see in Tress.
Sure.
Maybe the moons are spaceships.
To be fair,
that are hanging low orbit.
To be fair,
not orbit, but
there's
what if the moons are corpets?
Oh my god!
and we just need to be friends with the moon.
Yeah, they don't have a friend to talk to them.
I can see a situation where a bunch of Aethers show up on this world, and they are much more similar to the primal Aethers, and then over time, maybe because there's no water on the moon, like they essentially go feral and frenzied.
Okay, sure. Yeah, like they were originally sapient, and they've just been sort of like made choices and grown along this path, perhaps.
My other third read of that would be that like they really were planted like a seed, and they have the way they have grown, they have become in this way feral, and that's just how this one happened to take, as opposed to having once been intelligent.
I do really like the idea that the primal Aethers, who knows how they were created, but like maybe they're like gardeners and gardening their Aether in like a variety of situations and planets, perhaps. Like I could totally buy that. Like I do kind of like that. So maybe somehow the Aethers created the moons and put like this bud in each of the moons, maybe, and it's sort of grown in this way.
Found a planet with 12 moons and they're like, this is ideal.
Like, what a coincidence.
this extra moon, get out of here. We're booting it out of here. Red spike it and get out of here.
On that moon, the 13th secret
That's
Aether
where it is. Yeah. It's actually an actual moon in orbit. No, that's not true. That we know of.
That'd be funny.
Let's talk spore eaters now. Because they're interesting, right?
Yeah.
There has been. Well, let's. Does anyone have the quote handy for?
Which quote are you thinking about?
Just what they are, like Ulam's.
Oh, I've got it right here.
Okay. Why don't you give us the description of what the spore eaters are?
Okay. There's going to be some. I'm going to drop out some of the stuff about Ulam holding kidneys as I go.
Sure.
Because I feel like that's not relevant.
A great loss.
I know. The captain is a gestator for the verdant Aether, Dr. Ulam said. She gestate what? Tress asked, sitting in her exam room. Not gestate. Gestate. It means to incubate. Crow is the host to an aggressive strain of the verdant parasite. Your lore calls people like her spore eaters, though I find that an imprecise term. And he later goes on to essentially explain that that spore eaters are directly connected to what he refers to as the prime verdant Aether, in this case for Crow. Yeah, prime versus primal. Enjoy that, everybody. And she is driven to drink water increasingly as time goes on to provide water to the Aether up on the moon. And the parasite will defend her so that she continues to send water up to the moon. But it will eventually.
They're making like spores and stuff?
I don't know if that's how they're making, if like that's how that works precisely. Like that connection is not explicitly drawn. I think that's possible.
But they're clearly like getting stuff from them. So that's very interesting.
They're sort of discount Aether bound.
Yeah.
Because they do have this major connection, but like, comes with a risk of death.
With a certain death.
Certain death.
Yeah, it's a death sentence.
And I keep coming back to the word parasite when it comes to this, right? So with Twin Soul and presumably with all the other Aetherbound, we are looking at a very symbiotic relationship, right? You as a human, as the Aetherbound, you get a bud of the Aether that you're going to get bonded to, and you really have a partnership there, right? The Aether is not necessarily like Silajana is not necessarily forcing Twin Soul to do anything, right? It's much more akin to the Sprint bond that we see in Stormlight, where the people are, if not friends, then at least colleagues. And in here, you still get, I don't know if the proper term would be a bud, but you still get something of the Aether, right?
Like a vine hanging out in your body.
So Crow, whether she got a spore, whether she got a special spore, whether she got something else, she got something from the verdant Aether, right?
Yep.
And that something has probably much more, I don't know if I would say that. The way her vines behave is much more independent, and they're much less under her control than anything Twin Soul can do. Right? When Twin Soul is doing Aether stuff, there's no risk of that Aether stuff, of like Silajana taking over, right, and doing their own thing.
The level of control that Crow can display is just preventing it from emerging, really. It's never shown that she can really do anything herself to control the vines. It's just telling them no.
It definitely doesn't seem like Crow is ever talking to the verdant.
Yeah.
I never saw anything like that.
Like that was never my impression, right? It's just like it's a thing growing in you, and like it doesn't seem like she necessarily, like she obviously doesn't understand a certain death sentence, right? So
yeah, which is why I'm curious, like how do you become a gestator for?
That's a great question.
The Aethers? Because I mean, presumably with Twin Soul, like okay, so in Aether of Night, you have like the families that each family can have like a certain type of Aether. So if you're from the Amberite line, you can't have a verdant Aether, supposedly. Supposedly. It's a plot point, but it's not a point right now. But you have a choice. There are people from the Amberite line that will never get bonded to an Amberite Aether, and it's fine. Like it's a personal choice. Or well, I guess societal choice, because obviously like the heirs are always going to have the Aether and all that. But yeah, it's a choice. But why would you ever choose to be a gestator with it's basically a death sentence, and
yeah,
these things are super aggressive. So then how did Crow get the verdant Aether that's inside of her and is pushing her to do all these things?
If I was going to come up with a crack theory, the two legends are you fall in the spore sea or you eat a special spore. And in my mind, I'm just going to go with it. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to both. And you fall in the sea, and the Aether above kind of is like, would you like to die, or are you going to eat this spore? You know, like I think it's got an intelligence enough that it could make that sort of potentially, at least implicitly, make that deal with somebody, and they could be like, well, it's a year of life left, you know, or whatever. But I do think that people don't go for it. I think it's something that happens to you, even if that's not the exact scenario.
I agree that it's probably something that happens to you. I think it's even more random than that. Maybe there are, like in the process of producing spores, the moon Aethers, maybe like some of the spores are special. And most of those are just out in the sea, you know, swimming, not doing much. Maybe every now and then someone stumbles upon one in some way, and then that incubates inside them.
I like the idea of like eating a special spore, and instead of you like exploding into vines, it like you get a different sort of bond than a Luhel bond. Like now it's sort of attached to you. Like I don't think there's actually any like, I don't think the verdant Aether talked to Crow as like an offer type thing. I think it's just a thing that happened, and it's a parasite and just like sort of latched onto her, and it's like, okay, well, this is now growing in me, which is really terrifying alien vibes, honestly.
For sure. I was just thinking more that like we don't often see, like, it's not like when you think about spray on the like on the sea, you're on a ship, right?
Mhm.
There doesn't seem to be a sort of problem with that. We're not seeing people just
True.
randomly like exploding into vines like on the deck, and they're like,
True.
God damn,
True.
you got hit by a splash.
True.
So I think it is like, I'm confused how you would end up eating an Aether, like how you would get it in your mouth by accident. But another thought I had was if some people have this information, those people could potentially be valuable enforcers if you've got people that you just don't care about. And you can just make somebody into a spore eater and be like, well, you could also lose control of them pretty easily, potentially. But
That could be bad. Yeah.
yeah.
Wondering, like with the verdant spore in particular, I wonder because people talk about eating special spores, but no one in their right mind would willingly eat a spore,
Right.
Presumably. As they have, in their right mind. But I'm kind of wondering because like verdant in particular is sometimes used as emergency food.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So I wonder if like there is any chance that your particular verdant vine that you eat may come with a special Kinder Surprise death in 1 year.
I could buy that.
I guess, but like then you have to explain the other 11. Like nobody's going to eat a sunlight spore and be like, oh my gosh, like
This red spike is delicious.
No, they are used for cooking, so those could like attach to the food you cook.
But I think they would be like burning hot, and like it'd be like if someone brought you a hamburger with like a coal on it still, and you'd be like, oh my gosh,
It's potentially possible that there might not be a spore eater of every type potentially.
Well, I've wondered
maybe.
about that. Yeah,
but
Because
it
I
could be
am
easier for
also
some of
like,
those.
because like there are some like because like verdant spore eater that like works. There's vines growing out of her skin, sure, but like imagine being even the red spike spore eater that still works because like spikes bursting out of it. But imagine a sunlight spore eater, like you get shot and suddenly you burst into flames. That's not very protective.
so if you just like burn somebody though, you could just like a jet of hot light that could mess somebody up. I like imagining the midnight spore eaters and like having a smoke monster crawl out of your body and then like kill somebody and then climb back in.
So
You are Ray Shafir. Ray Shafir is actually a midnight spore eater. Easy.
See, that's another possibility right there. But I do feel like the moons need water. Like there's a part of me that makes you almost feel like they would like the midnight Aether needs water too. It's still if they use it to produce spores and they use it to do something. So I feel like maybe it's harder, but I have to believe they have at least some.
They voraciously want water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like that's maybe even their primary objective. Because they just want to grow and do that.
I do wonder if like perhaps the reason that the moons are dumping so much Aether spores into the seas because they are trying to like what if the overall goal is for every spore to be the sort that can produce a spore eater, but they like don't have the process down, so they just produce those millions of spores in hopes that like one in 10,000 is going to be the one they need to feed themselves.
I like all those theories. They seem really plausible. And I added the question to my question list so that we can ask Brandon if he ever does a spoiler stream.
One of these days.
I mean, how does one become a spore eater is a very good question that he could probably talk about for 10 minutes. Cool. I really like these ideas. And I mean, I really like that idea, Alla, of just this is the shotgun approach of I'm just going to make a crap load of pollen and I'm just going to hope some of them work, right? Like that's totally a thing that happens in life,
That's
right?
true. It's kind of a planty thing.
Yeah. Or like sperm or something, let's just have a lot of it and,
Speaking of tons of eaters, I have a question to you all because this has been bugging me since the preview chapters.
Okay.
How is Lumar not completely covered in spores right now? Because there is no reference in the book to like, some islands had to be abandoned because they drowned in spores, or like the level of spores is rising year by year, but never hear anything about like the lunar grease stopping. So what's preventing the planet from just completely being covered in spores after like few hundred years of the moons doing their thing.
So I have an idea actually, and it doesn't work perfectly, but I think it works pretty well. We know from the Lost Metal that if Twin Soul doesn't have a connection to his Rosite creations, and if he is, we haven't talked about this by the way. At some point, we need to talk about this. If he's not in a field of stable investiture, like what the hell was?
Oh my god!
I forgot about that.
Okay, I've looked at that a little bit for the articles, and yeah, you have to have the right investiture field to have the Aether maintain itself without degrading away.
Yeah, and so I think
Hell is an investiture field.
I do not know. I'm not touching that.
Okay, very valid.
There are conditions under which the Aether is stable, and or not the Aether, I guess, the substance, right? And otherwise it just like evaporates, right? It turns into dust, and the dust goes away. Which is reminiscent, by the way, of like
Wendell.
When Wendell, when he moves around. And so I think there is enough room there for all the spores are falling, they're creating these seas, and then over time the oldest spores just evaporate. They're gone.
I see.
Another thought I have as well is, because you're also thinking what's happening to these big chunks of Aether, that get formed, and then they're presumably, I think at one point mentions that they kind of end up in the middle, but I don't really know.
I think they fall on the...
And they fall, but...
Yeah, they drown.
They drown. Okay, so the thing that I thought was really interesting, got just like one throwaway line, and I was annoyed we never came back to it, but they were talking about when they're at Zigzix's house, a name I cannot pronounce.
Yep.
There's a line that goes, talking about his workers. They had important work to do, after all, serving him and his research into the complex ecosystem at the bottom of the spore seas. And so there's interesting stuff going on down there. And it reminds me a little bit of connections that we'll explore later, but how sandlings eat sand, and then like they're eating a substance off of it. So I wonder if maybe there's something down there that can be eating the ether. And consuming that as some sort of fuel.
I mean, that also makes sense life-wise. It's like, hey, lots of spores. I'm going to develop to eat these spores or something, right? That would also make sense.
And Brandon likes to, he hasn't got into it too much, but he likes to do like a mass balance thing with a lot of his worlds, where like they'll destroy gemstones, but gemstones will come into existence elsewhere. And like metal will be burned. But like maybe metal's coming into existence elsewhere, whether that is as ATM or it is as something else.
Sure.
So I definitely, if there's an Aether input, I expect he's got kind of a vague idea about an Aether output somewhere in the system.
Do you think that speaking, because you were talking about creatures that might eat the output of the spores, do you think like verdant vines rot?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would assume they disintegrate.
Yeah.
So here's my thought. Maybe verdant vines eventually disintegrate. Maybe there is some sort of investiture field on Lumar that makes this work. I know, walk with me. But maybe it's kind of a weaker field. Okay. And so the vines can persist a while, but they will eventually disintegrate. The spores, however, might be a specific adaptation, let's say, that lets the spore persist a lot longer than what an actual vine would allow, perhaps, that to exist in this world, rather than just like maybe the investiture field is not strong enough to sustain a giant mountain of rosite or something, potentially, right?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting to think too, like I'm probably not even smart enough, but you have to do some back of the envelope math about how this would work. But like, how much Zephyr has been created? Like, is the atmosphere thickening substantially over the 1,000 years?
That's actually a good point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or would that have to decay away at some point so your atmosphere is not continually getting denser?
Not entirely, like someone probably maybe in the comments will have the requisite knowledge of like astrophysics, but I'm pretty sure like the atmosphere a planet can hold depends on its like mass and gravity and surface area. So the excess like that dictates the pressure the air can have. So the excess would just I guess it would vent into space.
But you would still have to reach that point. And if you think like, let's say it's about as large as Earth, just hypothetically, like Venus has a much denser atmosphere. So you can fill up an Earth-sized atmosphere with much more gas than we have.
That's all of this is true. This definitely makes me think that the complex ecosystem might be very complex for how what the spores grow into and how that all works. Could be very complex.
Okay, but like now you're making me think like, so is the air on Lumar like a mix of normal air and like Zephyr air?
At least a little bit.
So
Theory. So assume for a moment with me that the moon of Lumar the planet of Lumar used to be like lacking the atmosphere, and it just had the 12 moons, and that's where all the substances there came from. Like air came about because the Zephyr moon created Zephyr. So in theory, if we assume that these elements created by the Aethers do decay over time, does that mean that there is a potential that if the planet runs out of water and no more ether can be manifested, will the entire atmosphere of the planet eventually just fade away?
There's a lot of assumptions in that. I think if everything you said is true, then maybe. I don't know about how spores would react to ice, because I don't know how you would get spores to trigger on an atmosphereless planet, because that water is all going to be ice. And so if you press a spore up against ice, does that work? An interesting question.
Oh boy, Brandon.
I have like 5 new questions on my list just as we talk. Like, so if I'm looking down, it's probably just me writing down something on my phone.
Well, and also like air, it's water vapor, right? You know, you need that
portion of it,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, clearly, moisture in the air doesn't trigger spores, right?
Yeah,
you need essentially liquid water. Or liquids, or
at least a high enough concentration, perhaps.
Yeah. Questionable whether other liquids can also like create substances out of spores.
How much water has to be in a mixture to trigger an Aether?
Great.
I mean, like, we know that at least water-based liquids can operate. Like blood triggers.
Blood can.
Yeah,
but blood is like almost 50% water.
Is it really only 50%?
Yes, about.
Wow.
So the source I found said that 55% of blood is blood plasma and 90% of blood plasma is water.
Yeah.
So around 50%.
If only Jess was here, she'd probably know this off the top of her head. But
Jess, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's pretty low proportion water, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you know, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of cells that need to be in there.
I mean,
stuff,
blood is thicker than water, so.
Okay. So I want to get back to, does the Zephyr that manifest disintegrate?
Okay. I think this is into a related question, which is, why can you keep feeding water to the verdant Aether and eventually it just becomes like an edible plant? Because it seems like you can, quote unquote, become like a real boy with an Aether, you know, like Pinocchio. And you can like make it into an actual substance that I assume would not degrade, because if you're eating this, you don't want it to eventually degrade into not carbon anymore.
Right. Sure.
It makes up the atoms of your body.
So potentially, maybe none of these Aethers degrade. Potentially. Maybe the investiture field is sufficient to sustain them, and there is a complex ecosystem of like eating the manifested vines, or like other things, or don't know what you deal with the red spikes, because clearly like the red spikes aren't. You don't have permanent red spikes on the Crimson Sea, right? Like they
Maybe
clearly. Yeah, I mean, I guess
because what happens? Well, so what happens is, right, rain falls, and you get these spikes jetting out of the ocean, and then eventually they just like drop to the floor.
Oh, okay. So it's just right, because they're not the whole. Yeah, okay, sure. Right.
They don't disintegrate. That still makes the whole like system of the planet unstable, because eventually just the mass of stuff at the bottom will raise the raise the
Rasarr?
spore levels on the surface.
Rasarr, this is a planet with 12 moons that are in some kind of weird, messed up geosynchronous or like nothing here is stable.
The
No, that's a good
moons-
They
point.
can't be orbiting. Like physically cannot be
They
orbiting.
absolutely can't.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. The moons are locked into place with the investiture field, obviously.
Obviously.
Come
So there
on.
were spaceships, because these are the spaceships the
They're-
Aethers
they're-
came
they're-
to the
yeah.
planet with.
Inside the moon is a spaceship, and it's just
like
grown.
12 destiny balls around the planet.
Yeah, perfect.
Wow.
Nice.
Part of it, USS Eurythero.
Yeah. And that 13th one, Eurytheru in the future. Boom.
They all have carpets inside them.
Yeah.
I guess that's possible.
I-
That's what
I have
Tesla is.
I have no idea how the people who do Cosmere mechanics all the time not go insane with all this.
There are two assumptions there that you're making, and they're
I mean, it really does beg the question on what that complex ecology is. I do think it is possible that eventually the spores will get so big that they will cover the planet. That like whatever is growing or eating whatever's going on at the bottom of the sea, to have the seas be at least relatively stable in the last thousands of years, right? That eventually could change. Maybe the Aethers eventually like get enough water that they can produce more spores. Unclear how they produce spores. Like that rate could change over time potentially as well, and could absorb the whole planet. I do think that's possible.
There could be a larger cycle where they produce Aethers and they stop for a period of time, and
Yeah,
then
maybe.
regressive. They're like the planet is such a weird puzzle box that I have too much trouble like explaining any individual element, that I kind of have to just accept it as an inexplicable whole.
Yeah,
like-
that's a
I just
The 12 perfectly predictable rain line storms, 11 that appear on the planet, except for just on one, except for in the Crimson where they're random. I'm like, well, it was built this way, or planet just wanted it to be this way. So
How
it's
do you-
the way
and
it is.
rain is apparently not sapient.
well.
So it's just sort of does it.
How do you get rain when there's so little water on the planet?
Yeah,
Where
how
does
is
the
there a
water
water
make it come
cycle?
from?
Like,
He made fun of explicitly this conversation in the book. So
yeah.
I am aware.
Fine, I'll get a hobby.
I mean,
Because, like,
this is our lobby, I guess.
If the substances created by the ethers persist, the planet is getting less and less water by the year, because the substances created by the water absorb the water and don't release it further. Meaning that with
Sure.
every year, the planet gets drier.
I can
So
buy
maybe
that.
Yet
the
another
Aethers
way.
are sweating. Like on the moon, so they're just sweating moisture off, and that's
they're
returning
so
it
close
to
to
the
Why
the-
would they need water?
Oh my god.
Like maybe there is like a weird thing, because like there's no way you can get like rain, especially this much, with like a handful of lakes on the entire planet.
Yeah.
Like this is just you don't have a water cycle. So maybe there's like the sea, like the gas that's coming from like the core of the planet or whatever.
Oh yeah, but just
Is-
that
Oh.
aspect
like-
of everything.
Things are like, maybe there are chemical reactions that are happening like in high atmosphere or whatever, and that's producing water, but the individual hydrogen and oxygen is not.
The magical
enough to-
BS
Just-
in the Cosmere is sufficient to make this planet work for the not geologic time, maybe, but for like a while.
Yeah. And like we at some point, like we have to consider the chemical composition of like Zephyr and what goes in there, because like it smells like rain, so there's probably ozone in there, which means there's oxygen. So if it also releases hydrogen, maybe there's a situation where that eventually
I
turns
totally
into water.
think Brandon's thought about all of this. And
My favorite part.
Just it's frustrating because every question we have about this leads to more questions, and those questions lead to more questions, and we don't have answers for any of this.
eventually it's going to be Aether magic. And let's do a zoom in. Hey, Hoid, how's it going? We are the people who obsessively track the things, and I see you're making fun of us, and I don't appreciate it. No,
It
there you
would
go.
be funny if the Silverlight novella gets written and they have that cameo of like the like charters, and it's like Hoid, you've made fun of us about this before. Please explain.
Yeah.
So,
No.
You know what I like? Maybe this is why the Tress doesn't have Ars Arcanum. Because Tress just looked at this planet and ran away.
Whoo, boy, I don't want to touch that with anything, really. I wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot red spike.
I just hope Brandon figures this all out and can give us explanations by the time maybe the Aether trilogy is written.
I mean, so
Question mark?
realistically, right? Real talk. We meme on this a lot, but like we don't really need to explain the weird things on Lumar. Like this could easily be a one-off weird Cosmere world. And yeah, there are some things that need to be explained at some point and figured out. But like the whole water cycle thing, but like it could easily be a throwaway planet, right?
I have a thought going back to Prime Aether and Primal Aethers, and so I want to get into this terminology here.
No,
okay, it'll be quick.
I hate everything.
Okay, the Primal Aethers are also Prime Aethers, but not all Prime Aethers are Primal, capital P, Primal Aethers. And so what I mean by that, right, is maybe a Prime Aether is something you can have a direct connection to, like with the Spore Eaters or the Aetherbound. This could manifest in many different ways. There could be many sets of those things, but clearly, like, you're connected with that Aether, and that is a Prime Aether. Now, the Primal Aethers maybe are the first of the Aethers and are definitely sapient. Okay,
So
so
and they're also
because
the first
of this,
Prime.
Yes.
I looked up Prime and Primal on the Merriam-Webster dictionary because I already had it open.
Great.
Always
good when we get to dictionary.
That's where Peter would go.
There are two definitions. One says original, primitive, and the other one says first in importance, aka primary.
Great.
Now, for prime, I'm going to skip the mathematical definitions and the time definitions. But one of them says the earliest stage, like spring or youth, the most active, thriving, or satisfying stage or period, or the chief or best individual or part.
That actually kind of makes sense to me because it's like
makes sense.
It's the highest level of Aether on the planet, and like you connect to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you can like make it make sense, but you cannot explain why someone would choose to use Primal and Prime.
You're not wrong.
At the same time, because those words both have synonyms, so we could have chosen ones that sounded a little differently.
I cannot wait for the primary Aethers to show up.
That's maybe one of the things that when Twin Soul's doing his introduction, like before he talked about Soljana, that's the primary Aether.
The primary Primal Prime Aether.
And then there's also the Prim Aethers. They're very nice.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And the Primo Aethers.
The Primo Aethers.
they only show up in Aether Prime though.
Aether of Night Prime, yeah, of course.
Are there premium Ethers as well?
Yeah, the premium Aethers.
You got to pay for
the battle pass. Yeah,
you got the whole thing. Yeah. Yep.
I do like something about this, Eric, though.
Okay.
And it's the idea of like differentiating the substance that gets produced. So like the rosite that Twin Soul can create. Mm-hmm. I think that allows us to call that Aether. And then the being from which that substance ultimately comes from is a Prime Aether. And in Twin Soul's case, that Prime Aether also happens to be a Primal Aether.
I do think this is actually how this works.
It makes too much sense not to.
I do concur with David that I'm annoyed with the terminology. Just to be clear, David, I totally agree.
That's fair. And you can make the argument that if you're saying they're the Primal Aether, you're inherently implying that they are themselves the Prime Aethers. Like you don't need to clarify that again. But I would need like a secondary use of Prime to be like super confident that this is the right interpretation.
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm. I do agree. Cool. So we've obviously talked a lot about various Aethers, but let's just quickly go through the canonical Aethers. Well, some we need to talk about more than others, but obviously we have Rosite. We've seen a lot of that, really, with both what Tress is doing and what Twin Soul's doing, right? So we've seen a lot of Rosite. We talked a lot about Verdant. So Vines can easily see how an Aether bound like that would work, right?
Mm-hmm. I know. I'm still waiting for Brandon to create a Spider-Man type character with one of these powers, because eventually it's got to happen. He can only dance around it so long. But
seems like Verdant's a good one to do that, you know?
Mm-hmm. These two are the ones that have least changed from the original. Yeah.
Definitely. What, you don't want a spore to come create like eagle body parts? The Bastaran spore.
The other flesh sea. I do appreciate that Brandon is doing the thing that he always does, where he introduces a new magic system, like by focusing on one thing specific.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we hear about Rosite, like we see Rosite in Tress. We see a little bit of Zephyr. We see a little bit of Sunlight. But like, Verdant is really the Aether that we focus on for most of that. And it's the Aether that we kind of learn about Aethers through the perspective of.
True. It's the title of the book.
Yeah, and I think one last thing that Verdant Aether before we go on. Brandon always has talked about, at least on occasion, that he intends the Aethers to be important for space age stuff. And so a lot of times, I think if you look at an Aether, you can kind of envision what he's thinking for space age stuff. And we learn with these Verdant Aether that if you feed it water long enough, it will turn into an edible food. And if you think about like a long space voyage, having like some sort of backup, easily creatable, like not so great, but survivable food is a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. I like that a lot. We got Zephyr, and Zephyr's related to the Sapphire Sea, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably the element atmosphere that Ullum references, if you're thinking about the elements that these are supposedly referring to.
Sure.
Which obviously useful on spaceships.
Yeah.
I look, breathing is one of my favorite things to do.
I am a fan. How do we think being a Zephyr Aether bound would work? Could you like, are you like airbending?
Airbending,
yeah.
See, okay. Well, here's a question too, because this is something I've been thinking about, and I have never noticed. Can Twin Soul only produce Aether out of his little bud initially, or can it come out of other spots?
So
I think it's only his bud, but I'm not sure.
It's only his butt.
I know, it's an unfortunate sounding word.
He does. So he does create glasses.
Yeah.
And I don't think he uses his hand for that.
That was my impression, but I'd need to reread that scene.
Well, I wasn't sure if that was tied into his whole superstructure that he's doing around his body, though. That was just like...
Sure.
Yeah, because he has like threads of rose.
Okay, yeah.
Of Rosite just threading through his body.
Okay. That might be a way for him, like maybe he's built, maybe it only comes from the bud on his hand, but like he's pre-extended that bud to like essentially cover his entire body. So if he wants to produce it from somewhere else, there is already an extension of the bud at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just mostly wondering because I was like, if you can only shoot it out of your hands, you're just not quite as cool of an airbender. But, you know, it's still something. I wonder, maybe it's in their feet and they can just kind of like jet around.
Look, I'm Iron Man. Magic systems. He's definitely gonna make that happen.
Like, that's true.
I don't see a reason why the bud would need to be in like your hand or your arm, right? Or if the splitting off of the bud is still a thing, maybe you can like put it in both of your hands and then put it in your feet and your back. So it's still like your own bud.
I wonder if like an Zephyr, like ether bound, could breathe underwater.
Oh, that's
like
an interesting
idea. If they could
idea.
get the air from Zephyr, like not even in your head, like, okay, excuse me for the body horror, but like they directly manifest the air in their lungs.
Sure, yeah,
like somehow
sure.
thread the crystal inside their lungs.
I don't know how you expel the carbon dioxide in that case. I think that's my only issue with that. The breathe out part. My scenario was that you can still breathe out. Just instead of breathing in the water, you get the air in your lungs from the Zephyr.
Can probably see that. Yeah.
I feel like you need some sort of mask to. Having gone scuba diving many times, I think you need a little bit more than that. But I do really like the idea of Zephyr being like that. That's your oxygen source, right? Like I like that a lot.
I prefer you covering your mouth with your hand and the butt. You just breathe directly from your butt.
Perfect.
You just pretend.
Perfect. I really like the microphone quality of putting your hand
I was
in front
thinking
of your
that
face.
too.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I was like, Eric's going to love this.
I love it. Great. Yeah, Zephyr Aetherbound. It really depends how much wind you can generate with some water. Like how useful that would be. Honestly, the spores seem more useful in a way, right?
I can see that.
But we have sunlight. What's going on with sunlight?
It's a weird one. They don't seem to like turn into a different mass. It seems like the spores themselves just begin glowing with a bright hot light.
Interesting.
And that's what happens when you wet them. At least it doesn't mention if they kind of merge or turn into a blob of gold or something. That isn't mentioned. So,
and we don't know the name of the sea that they correspond to, right?
No. I don't think so. Although I think it would be Sunlight Sea, like that.
Or Sun Sea.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Sure.
Sea of Light.
Sea of Light.
Not the Sea of Lost Lights. That's something else.
Nor the Sea of Night.
They're like,
no.
Totally lost. You're like, I thought this was the Sea of Lost Lights. And they're like, no.
You're somewhere totally different.
You are in trouble.
and that, by the way, is essentially firebending.
Yeah. Fire, light, magic thing.
I kind of associated with the light a little more. I feel like you could end up shooting like jets of light, which I mean it would be hot light, but like I associate it in my mind. They should all kind of be producing a substance. And in my head, light is close enough to a substance.
Light is a substance. It's a thing. Yeah. I mean, it's not matter, but it's a thing that exists.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of like a mix between firebending and like whatever you call what the Sun Summoner can do.
That's exactly. I'm glad you were thinking. I was thinking exactly that. We actually started rewatching.
I do wonder if like this is something that has range for like sunlight Aetherbound, or if they're like, you know how like in Diceborn, Hallie does this thing where she like can melt things under touch.
Sure.
Like, I wonder if this is how it works.
Yeah, like maybe sometimes you could like, I want to generate a lot of light. Sometimes maybe I want to generate some fire / heat, and you can vary that. And so, I mean, that does seem pretty flexible.
Yeah.
I assume, or at least hope, that they are more fireproof than ordinary people.
I would assume so. Hopefully. That is pretty standard fire mage stuff. It's like, hey, I shouldn't be able to set myself on fire.
Yeah, one does hope. One of the things that I was wondering was, we see pretty obvious parallels between night and midnight. We've seen them between, verdant, roseate, amberite. And there's a part of me that is like, okay, is this what luminous turned into the like in the canon Cosmere, or is this not paired with midnight? Is it because sunlight and midnight in my head, if you're looking for pairs, those seem like a pretty obvious potential pair, but it also seems a little less exciting than midnight. So
and then we don't have the whole like teletransportation aspect of it anymore, as far as we're aware. So
so far,
I mean, are these necessarily paired? Like, I mean, Brandon does like pairing stuff, so that does seem likely that he'd pair everything possible in the universe, but but like,
push for every pull.
We don't necessarily know how the structure of all 12 Aethers and the groupings, and it could be really complicated. Then my favorite Aether, of course, is the Aether of Red Spikes, Crimson, which is probably my new favorite meme of the element of Red Spikes.
A classic part of all elemental magic.
Red Spikes.
Well, it's hard to go from 4 or 5 elements to 12, Argent. You start running out of ideas.
This is bottom of the barrel. But realistically, he probably had the idea for all the things that happened in the Crimson Sea. It's like, okay, we can make that work. And like, really very cool on the Crimson Sea. Yeah. That was great. I don't know how the Aether bounds. Like, I guess they could shoot red spikes, maybe?
I think it's exactly my idea was like... My idea was like human porcupines or Wolverine or like Assassin's Creed like
nice. Yeah. I honestly both I think are very possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see it as being necessarily that dissimilar to Rosite, except I could see it having some sort of difference. Like maybe Rosite is stronger, but this, is sharper or more flexible in some way. But like, obviously we don't know what this is. There's been debate. Is it blood? Is it red spikes? And that's all there is to it.
No, it's got to be more than red spikes, of course.
But
they have to be made out of something.
One hopes. And they're like the 12th Aether, the Aether that no one is really sure what element this one is supposed to be.
Arcanists in worlds.
Oh no.
No.
I do think it's possible. Maybe you could grow like an Aether bound could make like things out of Crimson. Maybe like I think that's possible. It's kind of hard to like. It has to also be distinct enough from Rosite, right?
Yeah.
That's I don't know.
I do remember we were trying on Discord a while back to just brainstorm the uses for red spikes, and like the problem we keep running into is just we don't know enough about quantities of the material, because like we know it can pierce wood and human flesh, but like ice can do that if you put enough force into it. So it's until we know what it's made out of, it's difficult to speculate what it can do.
Yeah,
it's a clacking material.
Yeah.
I thought Tress missed an opportunity to make a spike gun.
That's what I was just thinking. Zephyr spores,
maybe a little too violent for the tone of the story, but just pin Crow to that wall. Like 6 of them. Those vines can't stop it.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable device, though, for Lumar, to be clear. Cool. Yeah, I mean, we literally don't know anything about Crimson, so like I guess that's all we got on Crimson, really.
I mean, we do know that Xyzis could somehow like make a living at the bottom with like walls made of crimson.
Yeah, and
so at the very least, it does somehow work as construction material.
Yeah, sure, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's interesting to say that this is the sea he chose to settle in. Like he's there studying the Aethers, and this is where he set up his home base, when I assume he probably, with enough time, could do that more or less anywhere he so chose, except for maybe the Midnight Sea, because he'd want to stay out of the sorceress's domain.
I think that's actually kind of why he chose the Crimson. It's because like people wouldn't get in his way and like wouldn't randomly show up at his doorstep.
Sure. It's very dangerous. So it's like, okay, well, I'll just chill here.
And he's a dragon. I don't think red spikes are going to affect him.
No, I think he's okay. Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I'm more concerned for his softer friends.
Employees.
Yeah.
Slaves.
Or just or just breathing down there, maybe he's using Zephyr to produce the air down there,
Very possible.
I think that's very possible. Maybe he has some great verdant chefs, He can make that verdant Aether into some good stuff.
Yeah, maybe you should grind down the crimson spikes. They make spices.
I mean,
it's great.
Get some chili.
Dried chilies, just huge dried chilies.
Nice. I like it.
I just think it's interesting that we spend time in the Crimson Sea when we only spend more time like in the Midnight and the Emerald Sea.
Yeah.
And we still know less about Crimson than we do about Zephyr and Sunlight, which are just barely mentioned.
Yep.
Well, they're not as useful, or at least not as obviously useful. I feel like is part of it. We learned so much about the other ones because Tress is looking to engineer with them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have a random side tangent, and then we'll get to midnight, because we absolutely will. If you need an investiture field to sustain the creations of the Aetherbound, that will potentially limit space age use, maybe. Because maybe the
I've
things
thought about
disintegrate,
that.
you know?
Mhm.
Unless you can create investiture fields
Yeah,
somehow.
sure.
I mean, the other thing is like the Aetherbound can just like continuously touch the thing, and that's enough.
Sure. So
That's
maybe
true,
you
but,
need
like,
an
if you're-
Aetherbound.
But if you're like eating vines, you can't be touching the vine as you eat them. Or like if you're breathing the air and that air is entering your body.
Yeah, I don't know how it works with air.
Well, it kind of goes back to the age old question of like, if you were to eat a soul stamped sandwich, like what goes, how does that work? And
How long does that maintain,
Yes.
the
An
sandwich?
age-old question.
The age old. Has someone asked Brandon Wab of that? Because
they've asked things about burning
Something
metals
similar.
that were
Okay.
stamped to be a certain metal.
Yeah. Well, you should ask about a sandwich, guys. Get on that. All right. Now we have midnight. And midnight is frickin' midnight essence, which is bonkers. I have an idea, though. In talking about the prime versus primal Aethers, I have an idea about midnight essence and its relationship with Rasarr. Because I totally agree. Midnight essence being an Aether, sure. I don't know how we got to that being on Rasarr, right? How do we do it? Okay. So, I think it's very plausible that the Primal Aethers can, make a new thing of themselves that would grow to be a Prime Aether on a different world, and that they are sort of gardening these strains of Aethers, and they grow in different ways. So, I think Rasarr is one such Prime Aether that the Primal Aether of Midnight made, and maybe that was on Ashen or Rasarr, I don't know, who knows. And Odium corrupted that. Okay, nice. And that's Rasarr.
Mhm.
Boom. Nice.
But
I
you
actually
would-
like that.
I was thinking along similar lines that like maybe some of the unmade are if Aether, suddenly I forgot English language, Aethers that have been stolen or somehow otherwise hijacked by Odium.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like you have Rasarr obviously with Midnight Essence, but you also have like Yelignar with crystals.
Oh, ooh, yeah, okay, yeah.
maybe,
kinda. Yeah.
Doesn't work for everyone because like you have
No, I don't think so.
Ashertmarn who is just like emotions, which
That's
feels
obviously
more
the
like
flesh
some-
ether, obviously.
You never know.
To be fair. It's
I
possible.
am less sold on that. Like for a long time, I feel there has been a theory that the unmade are kind of past conquerors of Odium.
Sure.
Mhm.
And I
Conquerors in what sense?
in that
Trophies, almost.
trophies, yeah. They are entities, people, whatever that they're the last remains of whatever world or people or population he has taken over. So I guess what I'm getting at is it's possible that Rasarr was not native to like the Rasarran system even. It's possible
so
that
she
he went
was, like-
through some Aether world and there was a being there and he like conquered the world. There wasn't a shard. It's not notable enough for it to be mentioned in Chris's essays and things like that. But like he goes through there and he snags Rasarr, unmakes her, and now she is part of his court, if you will.
So in that like theory, would that like suppose that aside from his big hunt for shards, Odium was also hunting Aether strains?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's possible, but not necessarily.
Mhm. One thing I will say, and we can debate how we want to take this, because Brandon had his sneaky face on when he was saying this at the time. But at Dragonsteel 2022, someone did ask, "Are all of the Unmade native to Rasarr?" And Brandon said, "Yes, they are." Yes, I'm gonna say all the Unmade all count as being natives to Rasarr. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do with that what you will. But that muddied the waters for me a little bit. And I will say that Shallan's impression when she touched the Midnight Mother gave her something that made her wonder if it used to be human. And I don't know how to square that with having been a primal Aether. Maybe they were an Aether bound that got that. But I feel like there has to be a human in the mix somewhere in there.
I mean, that's like Shallan is not aware of Aethers, their existence, so like she could think like something with like human like intelligence to her would read as a human.
But she's aware of Spren and whatnot, you know. So like she could have just thought, oh, it's an intelligence. But that's fair. It's possible that's her assumption.
So maybe Odium. This doesn't work as well as the previous idea, unfortunately. Stupid Brandon and his swabs. Ruining perfectly good theories. That maybe Odium was aware of the Aethers and whatever element they represent. How it relates with the surges, no one knows. And maybe created Rashafir, or in the process of unmaking, and sort of gave her the powers that essentially would be what a prime Aether of Midnight would give.
So like she's basically a great value Aether.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure.
DYI.
That like couldn't necessarily bond a bunch of people like maybe a prime Aether could. That might actually work a little better, honestly.
Although she did try to replace Patterns Bond.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
She was trying to bond.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's it. Would Shallan have become a Midnight Aether bound if the Midnight There's a question for Brandon.
Man, it's a good question.
Somebody write that down because I will forget it.
If we just link people this episode, if they want questions for Brandon, just listen to this episode. That's an interesting idea, but like there are a lot of things with Midnight Essence on Rasarr that's interesting, because apparently you can release Midnight Essence. What does that mean? I don't know.
That's always been a question mark, yeah.
I'm imagining kind of like a spore. Like it might not manifest exactly like a spore, but you could like move it around and, you know, put the water in and create like some sort of Luheli bond type thing.
It's interesting because there hasn't been a hint that the Midnight Essence of Rasarr has any interest in water. You know, like that's never like I'm curious. That's another thing I wonder about is
that is a good point.
Does it have that similarity or does it not?
So it is worth noting that when either Hoid or Ulam talks about the Luhel bond, I think it's Hoid. He says that it's the Hellbond trades consciousness for power, essentially. The Luhel bond trades a physical substance for that essence, for that material, and in this case, the substance is water, which suggests that it's possible that it's not always water.
Well,
there is also like small detail that Rasarr is a significantly wetter and more invested planet than Lumar, or Scadrial for that matter. So it could be that whatever they are getting out of high storms is enough to feed them.
I will throw out, I don't necessarily stand by this, and I think other people have said it as well, is Allomancy making use of a Luhel bond, trading mass for power.
I don't think that is the case, but I can see, like, because you're not...
You squint and look at it.
Yeah, but you have to squint. Because you are not like giving the metal to the shard, you are using the metal to open a conduit to the power of the shard. Like that's the metal is fuel, it's not a currency.
And you're not also not like you don't get to use your brain to like send it commands and things, right?
You said Allomancy commands all the time.
Okay,
That's how they.
okay.
That's how they do it.
Okay.
Yeah, but like there's not like another creature on the other end that you commune with to make that deal. Like you don't directly ask
right
preservation.
They are all
like,
directly, just like you would an Aether.
all Allomancers are Ferrous Aether bound.
Like you don't like commune with preservation to do allomancy stuff.
But you don't, like, Crow doesn't commune with the Verdant Aether to do her Aether stuff either. I don't think that needs to be a part of it necessarily. It's just a power trade, you know? Like, you can envision an Aether bound that doesn't talk to the Aether, you know, like a different, weaker version of it, potentially.
Evgeni, say our joke.
They're all Ferrous Aether bound. That's how that works.
Every Allomancer.
Yep.
Oh,
Ferrous.
Little did we know.
It turns out
when Mistborn died, they turn into columns.
yeah, that's the fact, you know, and it's proto-ruin.
This is how they built. This is how they built all those like noble palaces in Era 1.
Yeah,
That's dead Mistborn.
Everyone knows that.
Yep.
If you'll see it in the adaptation, Brandon's rewrites are expensive.
All of the ash is actually spores.
To be fair, there could be an ash like sea that could be cool. It's possible that with just like high investiture that you don't necessarily like need water or something. Like maybe you could like you could summon the Midnight Essence just with like, hey, here's some Stormlight or something, right? Like that's possible.
When you think about the fact that the sorceress is like bonded to and presumably sustaining like most of the monsters in the Midnight Sea, you kind of have to imagine that she set up a different mechanism to supply that. Like she's not chugging water.
Sure, right?
So she's not sustaining them.
Is she not?
I think there was a point of that she is creating them and essentially like
ramming.
Maybe that's not a good metaphor, but like oh, I know why it's not a good metaphor, because it's a Wheel of Time metaphor. She is summoning them and like imprinting commands on them and then just letting them loose.
Okay, I guess I was assuming that some connection remained in order for those commands. Yeah,
that was kind of my impression as well. Like at least the light one.
It seems like when you lose control of a Midnight Essence monster, it isn't necessarily like sometimes it just goes away, you know?
Yeah.
Or they do their own things entirely. So I kind of assumed there was something that kind of kept them on track. I could be wrong about that. My
impression is that there was like a light like connection back to the sorceress, and it's just like, hey, here's some water right now, and then that was like, it wasn't a strong one, right? It was like a very weak one.
Sure.
Because she's like doing this with so many of them.
She is also an Elantrian, so she could probably like do something to reprogram it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
or like use Aeon Door to maybe create water? ?
I mean, all of those things are possible. I also think it's possible that you could just give Midnight Essence like direct investiture, and if they can eat it potentially, like that would be fine.
Well, you think about Twin Soul with the door, right? Like she could very easily be doing something.
Oh, yeah,
Tress makes the assumption that they're connected and sustained by her, but that's not necessarily. That's what I was looking at, Argent. She could be wrong about that, certainly.
Right. Twin Soul doesn't need a bunch of water to do that. It just needs the door, and it makes a giant rock monster. So, like, of course, you can use the investiture to do that. So, like, the water is just like the low investiture substitute. You know, if you don't have a lot of investiture to throw around, so that we can still do. Like have some magical effects that maybe aren't like more shardic and high investiture, right?
Yep, I can get behind that.
So, like, if for the matter of summoning Midnight Essence on Rasarr, give us some Stormlight, it's probably fine, right? Like,
or Voidlight.
Who knows? Yeah,
who knows how all that works?
How they do that in that Starfall's vision? Where the desolation hasn't started yet, and it's like, would they have access to Void Light? I don't know. Who's summoning the Midnight Essence? We're never going to get any answers for this.
I've always interpreted the whole, releasing Midnight Essences as like released from gems.
But they didn't figure out the gem thing until like right by the recreant. That was the first time they had. It was a plan. It was a theory right at the end. So they've never trapped an unmade until right then.
Okay, fair.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries.
What are the other 10 deaths, Brandon? Are they Whiz One red spikes?
Well, okay. You know what the good news is, though? The fact that we now know Chasm Fiends aren't fused means they are not Chasm Fiends. Thunderclass aren't fused. They can be a candidate for being one of the 10 deaths. So we might have two.
This is not where I expected this episode to go.
Well, yeah.
Thunderclass.
You gotta keep them on them toes.
I think this was actually a really good Midnight Essence discussion. Other thoughts and concerns about Midnight Essence? Because I was concerned for a long time.
And the Midnight Essence creatures like swim into other seas.
Oh, that's a good.
If you assume we create just by rainfall, like just by dropping bottle of water into the ocean and commanding like a Midnight Essence creature, like go to the King of the Verdant Sea and like crawl on shore and eat him. We know they can change their shape to have legs, so
I would assume distance plays a role somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. So the further away the essence is from the person who summoned it, the less stable the essence is, or the less control the person had. Like something in there should probably prevent, because like rain falls in the Midnight Sea, so there are thousands of Midnight Essences there, right?
And if you were like a person doing this, right? Like Tress wasn't even moving her Midnight very far, and like that bond had to be broken, and she was like in bad shape, right? So like I think this is a thing that's like theoretically possible, right? But not necessarily practically. And honestly, it's probably just easier. Here's a bunch of investiture. I'm the sorceress. Like I think the sorceress could do that, right? If she really wanted, right?
Yeah, I don't know that her goals align with that. She's doing like a weird thing where she's like attacking them, like she's like destroying navies and whatnot, and like getting hostages. So I don't really even know what. I don't think she wants to kill the king. I don't really know what her game is there.
I'm just saying she could if she wanted. You know,
she probably could.
The sorceress can she doesn't need the Midnight Essence. She can just teleport over there and use her hand and kill the guy. Right? Like, there's lots of ways for the sorceress to kill basically whoever she wants if she wants to. But that's a really good question, though. Man, a Midnight Aetherbound, though. Whew.
Yeah,
I kind of like that better, I think, than like the whole Prime Aether thing, because it jives more with Shallan sensing a person in there, right?
Oh, that Ray Shafir was an Aetherbound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It kind of works. I guess both work with the idea that like Ray Shafir is spawning essences, right? Because both the Aether and the Aetherbound can do that.
Sure.
But I'm thinking of like when Rabonio was unmaking the sibling, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at Odium by proxy, like through a servant, turning. I guess I think of the Prime Aethers, if we use Eric's terminology here, as
I'm sorry,
grander than the Stormfather or the sibling or something like that.
At least somewhat, potentially. I'll give you that.
And so unmaking one of those and getting an unmade out of that seems less cool, less likely than unmaking a human and then juicing them up with Odium's investiture to like uplift them to an unmade level.
Here's a corollary. Just spitballing here. Dalinar is described as the champion with 9 shadows. Maybe those 9 shadows are previous 9 unmade, are previous Odium champions.
Wow.
I don't think he's engaged in a champion strategy 9 previous times. He surely would have figured that out, but he's just
gotta get it to 9. It's so
he's
symbolic.
Got an Aetherbound champion.
I think that is purely thematic. Oh, this is Odium's. Like the 9 there is just that's 9 is Odium's number.
So did he stop at 9? What if he was another trophy he wants? Was he going to kick one out if he had gotten the sibling? These are the questions that are like, who gets cut from the band if you've got a new...
The unmade of red spikes is out of here. Let's get the sibling in.
That's Diagonarthus.
Yeah. He loves throwing red spikes. Everyone knows that.
Look, Diagonarthus is
Isn't that like
connected to
the
Amia.
fisher?
Yeah,
There are spikes around Amia.
Yeah. The hazardous waters. There are the red spikes there.
He's just
easy.
spearfishing.
Yeah.
Red spike fishing.
Yeah. Easy. Evgeni, I don't know if I agree that the prime Aethers are necessarily higher than like Stormfather's sibling or Night Watcher. I would actually probably rate prime Aethers that or maybe slightly lower because like they're very sapient, right? Night Watcher's weird,
Yeah.
but like cultivation's doing weird stuff with them.
She's unconnected, Eric.
Yeah, she's unconnected. Right, exactly. But like the prime Aethers on Lumar, like, yeah, they produce a lot of spores and they connect with a lot of things, but I think all like the Stormfather is way more impressive, and I think the sibling is way more impressive in like many ways. So I mean, hard to directly evaluate them, right? They're not the same. Like they're not apples to apples. Like it's not. You can't just put them on the power scale. But now the Primal Aethers, I would say, would be higher than Stormfather sibling Night Watcher, but maybe below a Shard. That in my conception, like
that's a pretty good pecking order, I thought.
In my opinion.
I can buy that.
Also, I think there's room, like if the Primal Aethers are seeding Aethers on many different places, that there are prime Aethers on those worlds that are at different stages of development. So like you could get one that's like really new that like might not be even as strong as like Syl, right? Who knows? Although Spren are pretty, honor Spren are pretty strong, if you know, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Going off that, it keeps bringing me back to the Aethers, or the prime Aethers on Lumar, and how either or they grew feral because there wasn't enough water or whatever, or investiture, like what they need to grow.
Yeah.
But the other possibility is that might be compounded, like with the fact that they're relatively new. We don't know much about the history of Lumar, only that they really were there at some point. And so maybe on the like cosmic scale of the Cosmere timeline, they might be relatively new, and we don't know how long that is. But it's a possibility that those two things, then not water / investiture / them being newer, might just lead to them being so feral.
Yeah,
it's too bad.
Lumar's far in the future, right? We have Elantrian spaceships. Cool. For all we know, the Primal Aethers are seeding Lumar's prime Aethers right now in like Lost Metal time. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know how the humans got there, to be clear.
It could be. We needed like a creation myth from Tress. What are your people
The book's too short. I need more details. Yeah. What are the chemical cycles here?
Did you always believe that were the Aethers always here, or do you have legends of like your great ancestors remembering a world without Aether moons?
It's really impossible to know the answer to that, Veronica, and that's a super good point. Like these Aethers could be fairly new. Yeah, I really like that. Let's try and theorize on the 6 other types of Aethers, because there are 6 more that we don't have, and potentially a 13th. Wow, fun!
I need there to be a cat girl Aether.
Perfect.
That's a possibility. I don't think a huge one, but
the primal element of cat girls. Nice. Yes. I mean, it's just as rational as red spikes, to be honest.
I think so. Once you throw organic matter in there, things start getting hairy. Sometimes literally.
Sometimes literally.
I think metal is a likely option.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Um,
That's it's definitely like spawning some material. God,
Oh,
would
yeah.
that be a god metal? Oh my god.
So, I was about to say, like, cue the inevitable. Could an Allomancer burn a metallic Aether?
What's the chemical composition? Is it?
It wouldn't technically be a god metal in the same sense as like atium or rasium because it doesn't come from a shard.
Yeah, it's
It
an
could be
ether
an
metal.
ether metal.
Yeah.
Ether metal. Whoa.
Nice.
And now we have 12 ether metals that we have to discover what each
Just one.
Just one.
One for every
Oh, I guess
strain.
it would just be one if
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
one,
yeah,
just
yeah.
one metallic ether, but
I like metal. I think that's a very safe assumption.
Yeah. And
This is a lot of building materials, honestly. So I was like, okay. I don't know how we're going to distinguish.
Great Aether.
Yeah,
Mm.
bricks.
yeah, and honestly, it's a pretty good extrapolation from Ferris. That's less weird. And so it makes sense that Brandon would have just moved that over.
Sure.
It's just stranger to move over Bestarid because Bestarid is so weird. And so we have like
Yeah, I
the
don't
flesh
know.
eater questions, the category.
I don't think we're
I
doing
don't-
Bestarin.
Nobody has any idea how that would work.
I think Bastarin's gone.
Mhm,
but
yeah,
I think so
it's
too.
really likely.
I would throw out there as a possibility some kind of oil Aether. There's a lot of parallels with the
Mhm.
10 essences. It would match potentially what Murray's got in his pants. Maybe he did get oily Aether and did bleed on it on those pants.
Yeah, sure.
That's an answer
Sure.
right
Mhm.
there. But I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's very plausible. I like that a lot.
It'd be cool to have a liquid one, even if you can't do water, to do
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like,
Mhm.
even as gross as that might be, to be
Yeah.
water bending oil. But
yeah.
My
The petroleum Aether.
my one hang up with the oil ether is that ultimately this is meant to be like a magic system, and I'm not like, you can come up with uses for red spikes and metal
Can we?
and crystals for like people who like etherbound who use magic, but I'm not really sure. Like, for example, you don't have a Knight Radiant whose magic is like pave roads because that's not really convenient for the story of Revelations.
You gotta have
I'm
a
not
big
really
road.
sure like what the like
Use of that.
Yeah.
well, like,
I'm not really sure what storytelling use of an oil ether bound could be.
I guess like from like making a gun, like sort of, or like the engineering Tress does, like it's less obvious, although it's still a useful material. But like I think that would work fine. There are liquid-based martial combat abilities that crop up everywhere, so the material doesn't
Yeah.
particularly matter as
Yeah.
long as it's something.
I guess like water bending things, but it's oil, I guess. Oil bending.
I was thinking like a tremendous energy source.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Aether homeworld, big in like big oil, power plants.
Big oil, big oil,
Big oil there.
Just the whole like instead of like oil rigs, you just have like oil hotels where people just sit and just
Yeah.
drip oil into pipes.
Yeah.
Just pour water into them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can also like do some like edge dancery things potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just not really seeing how like an oil ether bound could contribute meaningfully to like the eventual Aether of Night book, proper one.
Yeah.
I guess, but like, how is a Duralumin Gnat contributing to Mistborn?
Yeah,
like
that can be some
there are
weird
powers
ones.
that are more important than other powers.
Sure. I think it's a good point though. Can we think of any other ethers?
So,
I think we need to
Yeah,
look at the 10 essences as
Well,
like
yeah.
that's exactly what I
a
just
part
pulled up.
of
Okay.
a part of this conversation.
Perfect.
Maybe smoke.
Because there are undeniable parallels between some of the Aethers and some of the essences.
Okay.
And so people have naturally talked about, well, are we looking at a situation where, okay, we know we have 10 essences, we have 12 Aethers. Are we looking at a situation where 10 of the Aethers map cleanly onto 10 of the essences, and we have like two special Aethers, right? Midnight notably has been pointed out as there's no I can't even say there's no midnight essence because there is midnight essence. But
that's actually very
No
funny.
midnight essence on the essences table.
Yeah, it's not one of the 10
Continue.
Vorin essences here.
Mhm.
Goddamn.
Yeah. And I feel like the big ones that are missing are smoke, flesh, and the nails. No, that's the body focus. What is
Metal.
what is like
Sinew?
metal? Oh, metal. That's Calic. Yeah.
Feels like sinew, isn't there?
That's the flesh,
That's
right?
the flesh one. I mean, flesh has water in it, so like that might have a similar water issue. I mean, it
You
does.
just squeeze it. You're like, don't worry, I can just.
It just summons dried beef jerky.
Yeah,
Just
the
bacon.
ether of jerky.
the Aether of Bacon.
Mm,
And I mean, I guess that would be the new version
Delicious.
of the story, but also, how in the world would a meat sea work?
the meat sea.
That'd be gross.
I mean,
Just like days, like water's pouring on it. Ugh.
Mm.
Oh,
I understand that it's gross, but also it's cool for me.
I mean, it's
Something of a body horror enjoyer.
yes,
because
indeed.
that's incredibly body horror.
Yeah, I just don't know quite how that work. And like the water aspect is, I think, my only issue with the flesh type
Mhm.
thing. But yeah.
Yeah, blood
We
is
have-
one that's not on here, but we've got
Yeah.
some people would draw parallels with the spikes for blood.
Because
Crimson.
they're red.
Sure.
I guess.
I don't-
the essence of blood is also associated with non-oily liquids, which water is one of those.
Yeah.
So that one probably either needs to go or be retrofitted in some way.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got rocks and stone, right, with Rosite,
Mhm.
clearly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do want to mentally, just because ever since Brandon said those famous words, 16 shards split nice on a table, like I always assume that there's like a table somewhere, at least in his mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like there's probably like a quadrant thing going on, or like something here where it's like 4 sets of 3, or
Or
like
sets of 3.
yeah,
Physical,
like you could-
cognitive, spiritual.
oh
Nice.
gosh, but like I would not be surprised if there was like
Mm-hmm.
a gas, like another couple, like smoke could be a second gas Aether, along with
Okay.
Okay.
air, if we're really trying to stick to the 10 essences closely,
Sure.
although it's not that exciting.
I
Again,
mean,
We do have like a wob.
Yeah.
We do have a wob from Brandon that the link between essences and ethers is very tenuous.
Sure.
Like it's not connection. Plus, if the ethers are correct in claiming that they predate Adonausium, then even that they predate Shattering, then they don't necessarily have to up to the same system as the shards.
Sure.
mm-hmm.
although it's possible that you could say like the 10 essences were inspired by the Aethers. What if they didn't meet them all or something, but they had like that helped influence their concept of what their primal elements were.
Possible.
And like the thing with the 10 essences is that like if we assume that sunlight actually maps onto this with the whole like ruby spark fire essence,
Sure. Yeah.
then what's the second weird Aether that
Oh, I
isn't the 13th Aether?
Oh, we gotta
like,
talk about
correspond
that,
to
yeah.
midnight.
What about
Um,
electricity? That'd be kind of cool. You could do, like,
Honestly,
chocolate shots.
summoning
Ooh, I
electric
like
sparks,
that.
that's
Yeah,
really
that,
cool
that
elemental
makes
stuff.
sense.
I like that a lot.
I like that.
Like
Yeah.
bending.
Maybe like if we have a heat ether, maybe there's a cold ether.
There could be an ice one. That could be kind of interesting. Although again, you got to be careful. You can't melt that ice.
Water.
It stays
Yeah.
cold.
Like I'm not saying like necessarily that it has to be water or ice, just an ether that when you wet it, it sucks the heat out of things.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I also keep coming back to the idea that teleportation used to be a thing in Aether of Night.
Yes, it was.
And so,
Yeah.
Very important.
I'm thinking if we want like weird Aethers, Midnight is certainly a weird one.
Yeah. True.
And so what if we have another one that doesn't like produce a material, but it does something weird,
Sure.
such as, well, else calling.
Oh, I love this. Like I can already imagine like the idea of like an ether sea that if you fall into it, you're just teleported into a random place somewhere like in the planet or in the atmosphere or in the ground. That's like the threat. We'd call it Sea of Lost Lives.
Listeners, we went a lot of places in this episode. We're still not done.
We always knew this was going to happen.
Teleported all over the place.
I think the teleportation is dead. I think teleportation is not a part of this anymore.
I also agree.
It's likely.
I can accept that. Yeah.
I think he's moved like the teleporty aspects, into Else Calling and like other magic systems at this stage, right?
Yeah.
I
am curious if there will be like god Aethers, though. You know what I mean? Or at least Aethers that, like adhesion and maybe progression, seem to be like a little more, have like a little extra juice to them.
Sure.
If that's something like Midnight.
Yeah, I mean, something like another weird one like Midnight, I think is possible. I don't know how teleporting is going to work with that.
Could be that dark Aether that's taken over Twin Souls world.
Yeah, what is up with We should talk about that.
We should. What can we talk about?
Do people think that the dark Aether is the Midnight Aether? That to me, that's like the first question that always is relevant to discuss with that.
If we are talking about something that has conquered and overrun a planet, an army of shadow creatures seems like it would do that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of Aether of Night.
Yeah,
basically.
It kind of fits.
Yeah, like I don't know what else it would be. Like that seems pretty natural to me.
Odium comes to the Aether planet to remove it as a threat. Chooses a Midnight Aether bound as his champion to create all the chaos. Turns that person into the Midnight Mother and brings them along with him.
Nice.
Onto the next world.
Okay, but like, would that mean that in Souls world was being taken over by like 10,000 years? Rasarr is at least that old, and Twin Soul is still like Twin Soul is still around in like
He looks really old. That's with age dilation. He's been
No,
I'm mostly joking.
I think it's a recent development, the things that have happened to Twin Souls world.
I would also agree.
That implication.
Yeah,
this does lead into my crack theory, though.
Okay.
That's less crack than I thought it would be, just like rereading it and talking about it before recording. So when reading Lost Metal, and like Eric mentioned, we're going to do an Aether episode eventually, but we don't know when.
Right.
Write down the thoughts you have.
Yeah.
And so I have a note on my notes app that says Aethercast. All it says is this: autonomy is the shard that might have got into the Aether planet. And the way autonomy has her avatars, like all over the Cosmere, and the Primal Aethers have their own extensions through the Aether bound, she hijacked that and is using it as a different way to spread influence. Somehow. But, there are things missing, and I have no idea. Except the fact that, Twin Soul is around, and like the similarity with the way the avatars work and the way the Aetherbound work. I have no idea of what's the thought process that led to this.
There is...
So that's why I'm calling it a crack theory, because I need more evidence and ways to link all this together so that it actually makes sense.
There is the fact that if you look at Autonomy's supposed core planet, the way that White Sand behaves is very Aether-esque.
Absolutely.
There's even... that's probably what they refer to in Tress when they talk about the bone Aether that's legendary and supposedly turns white or black. That's like...
It does seem like the best bet,
for White Sand.
Yeah.
It also does feed, the White Sand feeds on water as well.
Yeah.
So there is... we do know that it's like some sort of creature that lives on the sand. It does seem kind of Aether-esque.
It certainly could be. I really like the idea that it was skull moss from way back from Yolen. White moss grows on everything, but it doesn't really have a black aspect. So I've been unable to provide more evidence for that. other than the fact that I like the idea of skull moss being relevant.
Yeah, calling it bone spores really invokes Fane, if you know anything
Yeah.
about Fane.
Okay.
But saying, oh, sometimes it's white, sometimes it's black, that's very Taldane. That's very White Sand.
And like you could easily be fooled in thinking like this acts a lot like an Aether. It's like, yeah, you're not wrong, right?
Well, they describe the spores like sand a lot too.
Right.
Yeah.
So like it's very plausible that maybe someone brought some sand over and it got missed. Like, oh, dude, that's not one of the 12 seas. What the hell's going on with this? I think that's very natural. It's just there's not a sea of it. You got to go somewhere else in the Cosmere for it.
There's one enormous sea, but it's off world.
Yeah. Really, the sand comes from the sun? It does get charged from the sun.
It does get charged from the sun. Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't remind people of it's an investiture Aether.
Investiture Aether, yeah. I was gonna say
idea that I had.
Idea?
Oh yeah.
So I talked about it some more during the Tress reactions episode?
Yeah.
That and the Inking Out Loud episode.
And Inking Out Loud, yeah.
Too.
The gist of it is that yes, White Sand is awfully reminiscent of Aether spores in many ways, in that it interacts with water in pretty much exactly the same way that spores interact with water. That is, if you give it water, whether you just physically pour water into it or you form a bond as a Sandmaster and feed it water that way, it creates a thing, right? But instead of creating verdant vines or rosite, it seems to create investiture. It releases investiture when you moisten it.
Well, I totally agree. And like, and in the same way, like it's doing investiture instead of mass. You know what I mean? Instead of matter.
Yep.
The other places
exactly that.
Better, but
exactly that.
Q squared with investiture somewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I tried to during Inking Out Loud, I tried to tie that to the idea that it's being recharged by the investiture of the sun, which is not a direct parallel to Aether, because like Aether spores don't need to be recharged, as far as we know. That's not a thing. But if the lichen on the White Sand is like an investiture Aether, then investiture is different than mass. So maybe you need to throw in some weird things to account for that. So
maybe the spores are getting recharged from the investiture field.
They're gone. They've expanded, Eric. They're huge.
Maybe the same way that we were speculating that Rasarr could be like knockoff Midnight Essence. Maybe Sand's Autonomy's great value Aether.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable as well, right? Like yeah, absolutely.
There's also things happening on Dark Side with like the star carved.
Oh yeah.
Sky colors, I think.
Sky colors are gone,
now.
I think.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
Sky colors are gone. It is now star carved.
We'll do a White Sand Omnibus episode. I have not delved into it.
I forgot.
Probably this year.
No. It'll be soon. It'll be somewhat soon. There's no spoiler stream yet, so maybe it'll be sooner than you might think. And that will get terrible views. But if you're listening to this, I bet we'll talk about Aethers there, kind of. So go listen to that. Again.
But there are apparently star carved in Skathan's army who can stop bullets, I think is one of the things that Chris talks about in the context of, Sandmasters can essentially create like an armor of sand around them.
Yeah, as you do.
So there are weird parallels that probably need to be explored.
Turns out everything in the Cosmere was Aethers all along.
All along.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Allomancy is in there. We figured that out.
Great.
Urge binding is apparently there, so void binding is also Aethers.
We got a lot of room to theorize about.
Adonausium was an Aether.
Adonausium was the legendary 13th Aether.
He was the primal. The prime.
The prime.
Aether prime.
Premium Primal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will circle back for a moment and say that I don't think the Dark Aether is Midnight Essence, and I fall more on Cheyenne's side of things, where Twin Soul still he still swears by the 12 primal Aethers. Like I feel like if one had fallen out of favor, that might have been a little more obvious in some way.
Sure.
And my expectation, this is just based on just based on what I think, is I kind of suspect that the world is there's clashes between the Aethers, but I suspect that they're all treated with a certain degree of reverence as being an important element of the world. Yep. And while you can see one of them getting out of control, I think I'm more interested in a story where there's some sort of interloper that comes in and is throwing off the balance here.
Yeah, sure. Maybe Autonomy has an avatar there and has made something like the sand or some Aether-like thing, maybe, and that's what's going out of control. Maybe that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just really feels like Autonomy's MO.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
We have the fact that Twin Soul is now on schedule her Autonomy is invading again.
It's just Twin Soul's not attributing it to Autonomy, so that's sort of an issue. Like he's pretty aware of what Autonomy's doing,
and he would know. Yeah,
he would know.
That's true. You got to keep an eye out for a strict hierarchical system with several levels and specific names for each level if you want to find Autonomy.
Yeah,
true.
Gotta look for the suits and the Georns of
and the Mastrels. Don't forget about the Mastrels.
And the Lestrels and
the Underlestrels. I don't know if that's
I'm sorry, but
a shocking number of Trells in Taldane, really.
I was just going to say that I am honestly shocked that it took me so long to realize how many of those ranks have Trell in them.
Yeah, it's only one L. Just one L.
Oh, just one L. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is obviously that it's a play on Master, right? But
obviously, Autonomy infused the Mastrels with more investiture, and that's how they got their second L. Obviously.
So they spelled among themselves secretly.
Yeah.
Since we brought up Twin Soul, I wanted to talk a little bit because we don't know much about his world.
Nope.
But we do know a little bit about the ethers of his world. Because at one point, and I should have really prepared this myself. I really should have prepared myself the precise quote that he was using. I apologize because, just to be clear, Twin Soul's world is based on the culture of the Indian subcontinent.
Yep.
I do not speak any language that is spoken on the Indian subcontinent, which means that I'm going to horribly butcher some names right now.
Yep.
I mean, we all would.
Yeah.
So there's not anybody that can actually help
I've
you.
I've already done it, so don't worry. Just
true.
If you want to talk smack, I'll just give me your smack.
Smack Argent, everybody.
Smack Argent. He'll be out of con.
Smack me.
Smack him.
Okay, so the quote I've been digging for is, and he does his big crystal mech.
Yeah.
He says, by the grace of Silajana, Suna, Vishwadhar, and the 12 primal Aethers, I am Sanviv Prasanna Mahik Vasila, Grand Aetherbound of the 12 Kingdoms, Raj of the Coriander Court.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, first of all, we have 12 kingdoms, so is there a kingdom for every Aether?
Probably. Possibly.
But also, he's like Roseate Aetherbound, but he calls himself the Aetherbound of 12 kingdoms. So...
So the way I read that is, so he's saying, I'm Grand Aetherbound of the 12 kingdoms. So the way I read that is, I am one of the Grand Aetherbound of this empire that is the 12 kingdoms.
Maybe like a council.
I am so that's me saying I am a prime minister of Earth, right?
Yes,
kind of like that.
Personally,
I personally.
So the second thing of note here is that the Aether he is bound to is called Silajana, or Silajana, however you prefer to pronounce it. But he also says Silajana, Suna, Vishwadhar, and the 12 primal Aethers.
Yeah, and so if Silajana is not one of the primal Aethers, or he split this off, right? Silajana and the 12 primal Aethers, right?
Either he just saying that Silajana, Suna, and Vishwadhar are different things from the 12 primal ethers, or those are like the 3 specific primal ethers that he wants to specifically call out as special.
Possibly.
I think that's more likely because I feel like he'd be unlikely to be like these 3 and the other 9 of the 12. Like it kind of messes up your flow a little bit. Like you got to get on with your
which doesn't stop the white sand narrative where exactly that happens. Where Kush is like, oh, Shayla and the other 7 of the 9 or whatever.
Yeah, the 6 remaining of the 7 total.
Yes. Nice. Gotta appreciate the precision.
And the third thing is like the names of them, because we do get those 3 names.
Yep.
Shilajana, Suna, Vishwadhar. I really hope I'm not mispronouncing them, because you'll be hearing this over and over.
Probably are.
I'm sure.
I probably am, yeah. So we do have some translations, because the folks who do speak those languages have been trying to translate them over on the forums and in the Discord. We actually have a canonical translation of Silajana from one of the people at Dragon's Hill.
Cool.
Elani.
Yeah. Kalyani is a beta reader who helped with that aspect of the world building. Mm-hmm. So if anyone knows, she would
absolutely know.
Yeah.
So according to her, like Silajana means origin of the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool, yeah,
makes sense.
That tracks with like the
Rosite.
I keep trying to use amberite, rosite ether. But we don't have translations for the other 2.
Cool.
So we don't know what Suna or Vishwadhar mean. Well, like the speculation I have seen on the thread, that there is a problem that we don't know which precise language Brandon is using, because there is like a dozen languages over in that region of the world.
Yeah.
Apparently, Vishwadhar, the translation that some people have speculated is world bearer. Something that bears the world.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sounds like an Ashar name.
Another option is world's edge. That's more like if you look more like Nepali, apparently.
Maybe that's like a cliff. Like you could say that as being like the air aether, like the Zephyr, if you're like at the edge of the world.
Oh yeah,
I don't know though. You feel like you'd be able to say something like sky though, because that'd be a little more obvious.
Yeah, they're not direct translate. Like in a lot of these, people are looking for like roots of words and what words sound like.
Etymology.
Suna is the most mysterious here, but because like the options proposed for Suna is listen, barren, another like mountain, ridge, highland. So that's the one that people have the least idea of.
Especially
what
if like
that could mean. So
Silajana's origin of stone, right? Like that also feels stony, right? In a way.
But like all 3 of them could have, because if you go with Silajana's origin of stone, Vishwadhar as bearer of the world, and Suna as the mountain, then they are all could be like different stone-like things.
Yeah,
I feel like he's probably going for something else with those 2. That's my belief, that we've got a direct stone tie, and whatever they're trying to evoke with those terms is probably. I can't imagine multiple Aethers are named in such a way as to reference stone unless we've got another stone-like material that one of these is referring to.
Yeah, if those are all stone-based, I feel like those other 2 names are not Aethers then. I mean, maybe it's something else mythological in the world.
What if, this is going to be a deep cut, back in Aether of Night, there were some of the beings that were the upper level gods had children. They had 2 children that fought each other. And what if good old Silajana has 2 children in his dynasty, like children Aether, that are the other 2. There we go. And they are the new Fell twins that fight each other. Deep cut. Possibility.
Sure. I mean, you can.
Yeah. Maybe.
You could make some kind of familial argument here, right? Because this whole speech gives me kind of vibes of I am person, son of person, son of person. Like there is,
Sure. Yeah.
it's kind of a familial connection-y type of thing. And so if you are saying, well, my ultimate patron is Silajana, or my immediate patron is Silajana, then maybe these two others are links in the same chain, either in between or after.
Sure.
Or maybe going back to the like chaos order ordering of the Aethers and Aether of Night, maybe these are the ones that are grouped with Rosite / Lajana. But then the numbers don't fit because they're 12 instead of like 6 that they used to be before. So I don't know.
Cool. Well, that was a lot of stuff. So let's get on over to who's that Cosmere character. Wow.
This character is from Rasarr.
Menace, Tien,
Tom,
Raise.
Hoid in drag on a horse.
It's time for who's that Cosmere character. Caw.
It is Suna.
It's Suna.
For one, we know nothing about this character.
You know nothing.
This character
Oh,
appears in the Lost Metal.
Yes. All right. Welcome to Who's That Cosmere Character, the game show where you send 5 clues in a character to wtcc at 17shard.com. After each clue, these guys have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character. Wow, fun. This one is sent from Fire Aspect 5. And clue 1, this character has lived for over 100 years.
Spook.
It's not Spook.
Twinsel.
It's not Twinsel.
That's
Probably don't know that.
unknown.
No. Yeah.
The Lord Ruler.
It's not the Lord Ruler.
L,
L? No, it's not L.
the Rhythm of War character.
Yeah. No, it's not L.
Eldorado.
Clue 2. This character knows who Kelsier is.
Marsh.
It's not Marsh.
Kelsier.
It's not Kelsier. That's pretty funny. Fair
He
point.
knows better than anybody else.
Fair point.
Technicality says it.
It's not Sazed.
Hoid,
It's not Hoid. Clue 3. This character is not from Rasarr.
What about Orseer?
It's not Orsur.
Going with the Khandra theme. Tensoon.
It's not Tensoon.
Aelay, the Aeon that Shallan gets in Rhythm of War.
Seon?
Sion.
No.
I think I'll pass because I have no idea.
Okay, clue 4. This character is not a cognitive shadow.
What about Cal? No, shoot. No, I'm changing. Taking that back. I didn't say it.
You didn't finish it.
I'm stumped.
Okay, yeah, this is getting tough.
What about Mraze? I'm just gonna take that. Mraze.
It's not Raze.
No.
We don't really know how old he is.
Over 100 is a tricky one.
I know, right? That's good.
I mean, I guess I'm gonna just continue with the Khandra thing. Vendel.
It's not Vendel.
So
Milan?
It is Milan! Yay!
I had, but I went to the more obscure one.
Yay!
Does she know Kelsier? That's my. I assume
No,
they've
it
met.
knows
but-
who Kelsier is.
Yeah, that was what the clue said.
Okay, I guess that's.
Yeah, I presumably referred to the survivor at some point, right?
Yeah, I guess she's aware of who he is. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Clue 5 was this character has/had a romantic interest.
Oh.
There you go. Nice.
I was trying to see if I can guess Silajana.
I mean, how old is she? All right, cool. God, our episodes record so long, so we're gonna do our priority queue. Wow, cool. And you can send a priority queue by supporting us at the Herald tier on Patreon. It's $10 a month. Wow, cool. If you like supporting our stuff, you can go do that. Nice. I really sell it.
selling that one.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's-
I know. I am.
I'm
I'm a very
punching in
good
my-
salesman at the
I
end
am
of a 3-hour
texting you
recording.
my credit card number right now.
Yeah, great, cool. And your social, please. Put it in the comments. Don't put it in the comments. Please don't do that. Cool. This one is sent by Lyriel. Clue.
Again.
Yes. Clue 1. This character is a leader.
Kaladin.
It is not Kaladin.
Azure.
It's not Azure.
Sigzil.
It's not Sigzil.
Rayoden.
It's not Rayoden. Clue 2 will really narrow it down.
This character's Rasarr.
No. This character's life was saved by a protagonist.
Oh.
What's the first one?
The first clue is that they're a leader.
Later, saved by protagonist.
Dalinar.
It's not Dalinar.
But Adolin.
It's not Adolin.
I'm not sure this is a good guess, but I'm gonna go with Teophil.
Nope, it's not Teophil. I like that. I like that though.
That is a good guess.
I'm not sure if he was saved.
No,
by,
he died.
Well, no, before
saved
he
him.
died.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before he died, he didn't.
Again, with the before he died. No, but that doesn't work. No. It's too soon.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pass because
Okay.
we're kind of in a hurry.
Sure, yeah, no. Clue 3, this character considers law important.
And
No, it is not Elend.
I forgot all the clues again.
They're a leader saved by a protagonist and considers law important.
I could have hung on to that later. What about... I'm just going to throw it out there. What about Key from the Skybreakers?
No, it is not Key from the
Skybreaker.
Skybreaker.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Because that doesn't work for the first two.
No.
Did Kaladin save him by not killing him? What did we retcon the ending?
So retcon, I'm not counting that.
Could make that argument.
Yeah, you could guess it.
Yeah, but he's not a leader though. Like even within the Skybreakers.
He's a follower.
Notum.
It's not Notum.
I have no idea.
Okay, well, I think the next clue will be very helpful for everyone. So, do you want me to go to the next one, Veronica?
Yeah.
All right, clue 4. This character has been in a gunfight.
Wayne? No, Wayne. Wayne does have like
Wax.
access. Wayne?
It's not Wayne, Veronica.
I said Wax.
It's not Wax.
I'm like, can you guess the governor? But the governor is also secretly Bleeder, so I don't know how that works out.
Chris? Is that? No, it's not Chris.
I'm going to guess the governor.
It's not the governor.
Damn.
Clue 5. This character has seen death, capital D.
Marasi.
It's not Marasi.
Oh, wow. I wasn't super sure of that one.
What about, do we guess Vendel?
No, that was the last one that Vendel was guessed when you guys were guessing Kandra. So not this one.
I'm going to guess Vendel.
It's
He's
not
a leader
Vendel.
in my heart. Damn. He's a science leader.
Whoever is, I don't remember the name, but the cop that accompanies Marasi and Wayne to the warehouse for the meeting that goes wrong in the Lost Metal when they are later taken.
Not Blanchett, but like
Blantark?
something like that.
Is that who you're thinking?
Something like that.
Yes, it is that person. Well done.
Nice. What's her name?
Blantach.
Oh,
And
Okay.
yeah, and Marsh comes in, you know.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
he's in 2 scenes. There's only so many characters. that can
And
do.
Lariel does say, I hope Lost Metal's okay for this. It's like, it sure is.
it is. Yeah.
They won't be expecting it, but
I'm still adjusting my brain to
Yeah.
allowing it.
Oh, but you caught us so off guard last time.
yeah,
With some
that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. And that was the leader of the Bilming Constables on the Sting when they go to the Sting in part 2 of Lost Metal. So
I think that counts.
I definitely think that counts. And she does care about the law quite a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
but you
That's
would
totally
expect
fair.
Marasi for sure.
Yeah, I was so sure it was Marasi
Yeah.
when you said Hattie death. I was
I know.
like, I was debating guessing Marasi last time.
Even
I
though
had her on
wanted
my
to
mind,
be
so I just immediately went Marasi and it wasn't.
I wanted to guess that maybe Coin Shot from like the final chapters who gets
No.
asked to sink some ships. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
but is this legal?
Yeah.
The
That guy.
Skybreaker.
It's not a Skybreaker.
Definite coin shot. We now know.
We do. Awesome. Thank you all for watching. You can find us on 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can request Aether of Night, the original, at 17shard.com. I'll put the link in the description. It does, we have to send it out manually, so it'll take a while. And I imagine a lot more people are going to request it. So it'll be a bit like weeks bit, not like hours, just to be clear. But yeah, you can join our Discord where we also have lots of fun stuff as well. And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can support our Patreon for as little as $1. And if you want to give us more money, you can give us a super thanks and have your comment highlighted in the YouTube comments. Wow, isn't that fun?
I forgot about that.
I know. That's why I'm going to remind people. Like, don't you want your YouTube comment highlighted for all to see for the low price of some amount of money? Probably. Wow, that sounds like a steal to me. Great.
Really are the master salesman.
I know. We run a tight ship here, and all right, bye. Well, I don't know what's going to be the next episode, because I thought there would be a spoiler stream, and then we'd do the Aether episode. Maybe. So I don't know. Maybe there'll be a spoiler stream. I have no idea what'll be.
Life is a mystery.
In the next 2 weeks. Maybe it'll be White Sand Omnibus. Who knows?
I wasn't expecting a 2023.
Yeah.
React with the ocean emoji to this. Comment with the ocean emoji to this episode if you made it all the way to the end. I will watch.
Is it the Sapphire Sea that we're
going to
see?
It's a Sapphire Sea. That's right.
Okay.
All right. See you all next time.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Ta.